The first cool blue of the SIPADAN coral wall gathers around you, and tonight we drift beside it slowly, where reef light falls into deep water. Settle in and let your breathing find the same unhurried rhythm as the sea. You are just below the surface now, where the water feels warm against your skin, and the island above is only a soft brightness wavering through ripples. Around the SIPADAN coral wall, everything begins with light, with a green-gold shimmer over coral gardens, and then a deeper blue opening beneath your feet. We move gently, not rushing downward, just letting the wall appear beside us. Alive with small motions and quiet color, the sea smells faintly of salt and sun, though down here the scent becomes a memory, softened by water. You can feel the day loosening already, as if the surface has handed you over to something slower. SIPADAN rises alone from deep water, a green island resting on the summit of an old volcanic shape, and the reef has built itself around that hidden height for a very long time. You and I are moving along the rim of that living edge, where coral gives way to open blue, and the wall falls almost straight into the dimness. It feels less like a cliff than a curtain hanging from sunlight into shadow. Tiny fish hover near the coral heads, turning together with the ease of one thought. Their scales catch the light in silver flecks, and then release it again. Everything here seems to breathe through color, through current, through the patient opening and closing of coral polyps in the moving sea. Near the upper wall, the reef is crowded but never hurried, and you start to notice the small ones first, the ones that keep the whole place quietly awake. Orange anthias shimmer above branching corals like sparks held in clear water, and blue-green chromis tilt and scatter whenever a soft current passes. You can hear very little, only the inner hush of water around you, though the reef itself is full of tiny sounds, clicks and scrapes and faint crackles made by fish, shrimp, and shifting sand. The warmth is still with us here. Sunlight reaches down in long, pale ladders, and every ladder trembles. If your eyes close for a moment, the SIPADAN coral wall remains there, a bright edge in the dark behind them. The corals near the top are builders, though they build without urgency, grain by grain, season by season, each small animal making a limestone cup beneath its soft body. You can picture them as a city of quiet mouths, taking in drifting food at night, sharing sunlight by day through the tiny algae that live inside their tissues. Those algae give the reef energy, and the coral gives them shelter, and between them the wall grows into a place where other lives can gather. We drift beside this partnership, as if beside a lantern. It is ordinary here, and also astonishing. The reef does not need to explain itself, it simply keeps making room. A green turtle moves past us with the calm of something that belongs completely to the water, its flippers opening and closing like slow wings in a dream. Around SIPADAN, turtles are part of the old rhythm of the wall, resting on ledges, lifting now and then to breathe, returning to the reef with sleepy grace. You may see one tucked beneath a coral overhang, its shell mottled with soft brown patterns, its eyes half-lidded in the blue shade. Nearby, cleaner wrasse flash in small striped motions, attending to larger fish as they pause at familiar stations. Nothing is rushed. Even the feeding feels ceremonial. A gentle maintenance of bodies in a place that has learned patience. We move a little lower now, and the sunlight becomes wider and dimmer, changing from bright gold to a blue that seems to cool everything it touches. The wall beside you is still textured with coral, sponge and fan-shaped growth, but the spaces between them deepen into violet shade. You can feel the pressure as a soft enclosing hand, not heavy, just present, reminding you that the water above is gathering. The air of the world is far away now. Your breathing stays easy, and our descent stays slow. The SIPADAN coral wall continues downward beside us, and the reef life changes by almost invisible degrees. Here the fish gather in moving veils, and the first thing you notice is not one creature, but the shape of many creatures together. Fusiliers pass in blue and yellow streams, flowing along the wall as if the reef has its own quiet weather. They turn when one turns, and for a moment their bodies catch the light at the same angle, becoming a single silver ribbon. You drift near them without entering their path. They are feeding on tiny plankton in the current, taking what the water brings. Around you the sea has a faint taste of mineral cold, though the tropics still hold it gently. The light is softer here, and your thoughts can soften with it. The wall is not only a place where animals live, but a place where moving water is shaped, lifted, and slowed. Currents from the Celebes Sea meet the steep reef and slide along it, carrying plankton, lava, and fine organic dust from one layer to another. You can imagine the wall as a long table set for countless small mouths, though there is no clatter, no gathering noise, only water bringing food through the blue. Coral ledges interrupt the flow. Sponges filter it. Crinoids spread feathered arms into it. We drift close enough to see the details. Every surface is working quietly. Every opening is a place where life has learned to wait. A school of jacks forms farther out in the blue, not pressing close to the coral, but circling in a slow silver gathering beyond the wall. You may only see them first as a shadow that has chosen to move, and then as hundreds of bodies turning together in a calm spiral. Their tails flick with small, steady force, and their sides reflect the dimming light like coins underwater. They are not here for spectacle. They are simply living in the space where reef and open sea meet. We watch from the edge, and the circle seems to breathe. It tightens, loosens, and turns again, quietly holding its place in the water. Closer to the coral, butterfly fish move in pairs, tracing the wall with delicate attention. Their narrow mouths search between coral branches, taking tiny animals and soft growths from places larger fish cannot reach. You can follow them for a while, their yellow bodies bright, even as the light fades, and the rhythm of their movement becomes almost like a lullaby. A parrotfish scrapes gently at the reef with its beak, leaving the faintest pale mark where algae has been removed. That scraping, repeated by many fish over many years, helps make sand. Some of the white grains near SIPADAN have passed through living bodies before settling where waves can move them. Even sand has a slow story, and as we sink further, the bright reef above becomes a ceiling of softened color, while the SIPADAN coral wall opens into a cooler blue below. The next layer is still alive with color, but the colors have changed, and you need a little more time to see them. Reds become dusky and muted, purples deepen, and yellow fish appear almost like small lamps against the wall. Sea fans extend from the coral face, their delicate branches arranged to meet the current, each fan catching food too small for your eyes to follow. You can feel the water moving around your hands now, steady and clean, with a faint coolness entering the warmth. We stay near the wall, close enough to sense its roughness without touching it. It is a living surface, and we pass beside it with care. Sponges grow here in bowls, tubes, and rounded forms, filtering water in silence. They take in the sea through tiny pores, draw what they need from it, and release it again changed, cleaned, and moved onward. On a wall like SIPADAN, sponges are part of the hidden breathing of the reef, as important as the brighter animals that catch your attention first. Some are dark red in the remaining light, some pale cream, some shaded brown or lavender. A small crab may live inside one. A brittle star may hide beneath another. When you look slowly, you begin to understand that the wall is not a background. It is a neighborhood of smallness. A hawksbill turtle appears near an overhang, slimmer and more angled than the green turtle above, with a patterned shell like old polished wood. It moves with precise softness, pausing to nose among sponges and coral growth, seeking food in the layered reef. Around SIPADAN, turtles often seem to arrive from nowhere because the wall offers ledges, shade, and long vertical paths between feeding and resting places. You watch it turn its head slightly, and one dark eye passes over us without alarm. Then it glides away along the wall, its flippers pressed down on the water. The motion looks effortless, though every movement is perfectly suited to this blue world. You may notice how the sound has thinned here, or perhaps how your own sense of sound has turned inward. There is no crash of waves now, no wind, no birds, only the low hush that fills the body when water surrounds it. The pressure rests on your ears and chest like a careful palm. The wall holds shade in its cracks, and the cracks hold lives that prefer to remain unseen. A moray eel looks out from one dark opening, patterned skin folded like soft stone. It opens and closes its mouth to pass water over its gills. A calm breathing motion, not a threat. We leave it in peace, and the wall continues. The science of this depth is partly the science of less light. The sun still reaches us, but each meter of water takes something from it, absorbing the reds first, then softening the oranges and yellows until blue is what remains. Animals here answer that fading in many ways. Some keep bright colors that no longer appear bright at depth. Some use patterns to blur their outlines. Some come out more fully at night, when the reef changes its rhythm and tiny hunters move through the dark. You and I are drifting through daylight, but the wall is already preparing for evening. It is never just one place. It is many places, depending on the hour. A Napoleon wrasse moves through the blue with a slow dignity that seems almost thoughtful, its large body patterned in green and turquoise, its lips rounded and pale. It turns near the SIPADAN coral wall as if following an old route, one known by memory, current, and the map of the reef itself. You can feel how large it is without feeling any disturbance from it. Its eye is alert, but the body is unhurried. Around it, smaller fish part and return. The wrasse searches for shellfish, crustaceans, and other reef animals, using strength in a measured way. In this quiet, even strength feels gentle. We descend again, and the wall darkens by another shade, while the open water beside us becomes a deeper, more spacious blue. Here, the SIPADAN coral wall feels more vertical, more like the edge of a world that has folded downward into the sea. The reef face is broken by ledges and small caves, places where shadow gathers even during the brightest part of the day. You can see soft corals leaning into the current, their branches not stiff like stone, but flexible, pulsing slightly as water passes. Feather stars cling to high points, curling and uncurling their arms with the slow delicacy of underwater ferns. The temperature has cooled just enough to be noticed. It makes your skin aware of the water, and your thoughts aware of the depth. At this level, life depends strongly on what drifts by. Plankton, fish eggs, larvae, and tiny flakes of organic matter move along the wall, and many animals are shaped to catch them without chasing. Sea fans hold themselves like nets. Black corals extend fine branches. Tunicates draw water through soft chambers, filtering what the current offers. You can imagine the whole wall feeding in a way that resembles listening, each creature open to the motion around it. We are moving through a living stillness. Nothing appears busy, yet everything is being done. The reef is eating, breathing, cleaning, growing, and sheltering, all in a rhythm too slow for the surface mind. A white-tip reef shark rests on a sandy shelf below an overhang, its body slender and calm, its tail making tiny movements to keep water passing over its gills. Around SIPADAN, these reef sharks are part of the ordinary life of the wall, slipping through channels, resting in shadows, and moving with the smooth economy of animals built for water. We watch from a respectful distance. There is no need for drama here. The shark belongs to the same quiet order as the corals and turtles, the same web of feeding and resting and returning. Its pale fin tip catches a little light, and then the light moves on. Small cleaner shrimp wait in crevices, their antennae extended like fine white threads. If you hover with your gaze long enough, you may see a fish pause nearby and allow the shrimp to pick away parasites or loose tissue with careful little motions. This is one of the reef's soft agreements, repeated endlessly in hidden corners. The fish receives cleaning, the shrimp receives food. The wall holds the meeting place. You can feel how much of the ocean is made from these quiet arrangements. Not grand events, but relationships so steady they become part of the landscape. The SIPADAN coral wall is full of such agreements, layered into its silence. The rock beneath the reef tells an older story, one you cannot see directly, but can sense in the shape of the drop. SIPADAN is an oceanic island, rising steeply from deep water, and coral has grown around its upper slopes, where light, warmth, and clear water allow it. Over long spans of time, living reef has built on older reef, and the wall has become a vertical record of growth and erosion. Storms above, currents below, grazing fish, boring worms, and dissolving chemistry all shape it slowly. You drift beside that history as if beside a sleeping archive. The pages are limestone, sponge, shadow, and blue water. The creatures here do not live in isolation from the open sea. Pelagic fish pass near the wall. Reef fish retreat into it, and plankton from beyond the island feeds animals fixed in place. You may see barracuda suspended farther out, long and silver, their bodies aligned with the current as if they are listening to it. They hold still in a way that is not stillness at all, making tiny corrections with fins and tail. Their presence is quiet, almost architectural. They belong to the blue space beside the reef, where the SIPADAN coral wall meets the immense water around it, and where your eyes keep searching gently into depth. Below this, the water changes again, and we follow the wall as the colors become less like surface daylight and more like memory. The SIPADAN coral wall now rests in a dimmer blue, and you begin to notice shapes before colors. A sea fan becomes a lacework outline, a sponge becomes a rounded shadow with a pale rim. Fish appear and disappear according to how their scales turn toward the remaining light. You may feel the current more clearly here, a steady brushing along your arms, carrying coolness from deeper water and warmth from above in alternating threads. We drift with it rather than against it. The wall is close, the open sea is wide, and between them your body feels light, held, and slowly descending. This is where the reef begins to feel less crowded to the eye, though life is still abundant. Many animals at this depth are smaller, quieter, and more patient in their habits. Gobies rest on ledges, darting only when necessary. Blennies peer from holes with expressive little faces, then vanish again into the reef. Crinoids spread arms like feathery stars, filtering food in the current. A nudibranch moves across a sponge with such slowness that you might mistake it for a pattern, until its soft body shifts by a fraction. In the deepening water, even a tiny animal can hold your attention for a long time. The fading light changes the way bodies use color. A red fish may appear nearly black, unless your light catches it, which means red can be a kind of shade in deeper water. Patterns that seem vivid at the surface become softened masks below, breaking outlines against coral and sponge. Some animals do not need to hide by disappearing completely. They only need to become difficult to separate from the textures around them. You can see that the wall is a teacher of edges, of how to blur, how to wait, how to belong. We keep our movements slow, and the reef reveals more because we are not asking too loudly. There are tiny flashes now from scales, eyes, and the occasional planktonic body turning in the water. True bioluminescence is easier to see in darker conditions, but even here, the idea of living light feels close. Many deep-sea animals make their own glow, while reef creatures often use reflected light, color, and pattern in the dim border between day and night. At SIPADAN, the wall connects those worlds, the sunlit reef above and the twilight water below. You are drifting through that boundary. It feels like the edge of sleep, when familiar thoughts loosen and stranger, softer images rise from underneath them. A school of batfish may approach in a loose formation, their tall rounded bodies moving slowly, their fins trailing with a gentle wavering elegance. They often seem curious, though not hurried, turning sideways as they pass, showing you their flat silver shapes and dark markings. Around the SIPADAN coral wall, batfish can linger near divers and reefs, comfortable in the open water just off the face. We watch them come and go without reaching toward them. They are part of the floating life of the wall, not quite reef-bound, not entirely oceanic. Their bodies reflect a dim pearled light, and then they drift away into blue. The water at this depth has a different quiet. It is not empty, it is full of suspended particles, tiny animals, fragments of life, and the faint chemical traces of countless living processes. Every breath of the reef releases something into the sea. Every feeding changes the water slightly. Every current carries information, though not in words. Fish sense movement through their lateral lines. Corals respond to touch, light, and chemistry. Sharks read faint electrical fields. You and I sense less than they do, but perhaps that is why the place feels so peaceful. We are allowed simply to float, while the wall continues its subtle conversations around us. And as we descend further along the SIPADAN coral wall, the reef grows quieter in color, while its hidden life becomes more intimate. Here, The ledges are wider in places, and shadows collect beneath them like folded cloth. The coral cover changes, becoming patchier where light is weaker, but sponges, soft corals, tunicates, and shadow-loving animals remain. You can see fish hovering close to shelter, using the wall as both home and horizon. The open water beside us is now a darker blue, and when you look away from the reef, it seems to go on without edge. Your body may feel heavier and lighter at once, held by pressure and buoyancy together. We are still descending slowly, and the wall is still with us. A grouper rests near a dark recess, its large mouth closed, its body mottled to match the coral shadow. It does not need constant motion. It waits, conserving energy, trusting stillness as part of its way of living. Near its resting place, tiny fish continue their small errands, slipping between coral heads and vanishing into holes too narrow for larger bodies. The wall contains many scales of life at once, from broad-backed fish to animals smaller than a grain of rice. When you look at SIPADAN this way, the coral wall is not a single scene. It is a stack of small rooms, each with its own temperature of light. The deeper we go, the more important shelter becomes. Crevices protect fish from current and bright exposure. Overhangs hold cooler shadows. Sponge tubes and coral branches provide homes for shrimps, worms, brittle stars and young fish that will someday move into larger spaces. The reef is architecture made by life, then used by life, then changed again by life. A coral grows, a fish grazes it, a sponge colonizes a gap, a worm bores into limestone, and fine sediment settles where the current weakens. Nothing here is fixed in the way a stone wall feels fixed on land. The SIPADAN coral wall is steady, but it is always becoming. You can feel that becoming in the surfaces. Some are smooth with encrusting algae, some are rough with coral skeleton, some are soft where polyps extend into the water, their tentacles fine as breath. We do not touch them, but the eye can feel texture when it lingers. The water smells only faintly of salt now in memory, but it feels clean, cool, and complete around you. A small cloud of reef fish rises from a ledge and settles again. Their movement is like dust in a sunbeam, except the sunbeam is blue, and the dust is alive. At times, the wall seems to exhale fish. A hole that looked empty releases a cardinal fish. A crack reveals a shrimp. A shadow becomes the slow fin of a resting animal. This is one of the gifts of moving slowly beside the SIPADAN coral wall. You stop expecting the scene to announce itself. You let it arrive in fragments. A pale antenna, a ringed eye, a soft coral opening its tiny hands to the current. The reef becomes less like a picture and more like a long, quiet conversation, where each small detail speaks only when you are calm enough to hear it. The science here is also a science of energy. Sunlight is less available, so animals rely more on drifting food, stored fat, careful movement, and the sheltering structure of the wall. Many reef fish choose narrow territories where food arrives reliably, or where cleaning stations and resting places are close together. Larger animals move between zones, following currents, tides, and the daily patterns of prey. Life is not sparse because it is deeper. It is organized differently. We drift through that organization without needing to sort it too sharply. It is enough to feel how every creature has found a way to spend its days in this falling blue. When the slope steepens again, we sink toward the dim margin, where reef brightness gives way to the slower world below. The SIPADAN coral wall continues beneath us, and now the upper reef feels far away, though we have not left its influence. From above, tiny particles drift down, bits of plankton, mucus, eggs, waste, and broken organic matter, a slow marine snow that feeds deeper animals. You can see some of it in the water, faint specks turning through the blue like ash from a very gentle fire. The current carries it along the wall. Sponges and corals take what they can. Small fish rise to meet it, then tuck back into shelter. The whole place is nourished by falling, and falling becomes a kind of grace. Here, the quiet is not emptiness, but distance. The surface is distant, the island is distant. Even the brightest coral gardens above feel like a dream remembered through water. Yet the wall remains close enough to guide us, its textures emerging as our eyes adjust. A dark sea cucumber lies along a ledge, slowly gathering organic matter with soft feeding tentacles. A brittle star curls beneath a coral plate, its arms hidden until a current invites them outward. These animals live by patience. They remind you that not every life needs speed, and not every movement needs to be seen. The reef fish are fewer in the open here, or perhaps they seem fewer because they keep nearer to the wall. You may notice soldier fish and squirrelfish in shaded pockets, their large eyes suited to dimmer places and nighttime activity. By day they rest in groups beneath ledges, red bodies darkened by depth, waiting for the hour when the reef changes. At night, they will move out to feed, reading the water in ways we can only imagine. For now, they hover quietly, a small congregation in the shade. We pass slowly, and their eyes gleam like muted beads. The pressure is more present now, a calm weight around every part of you. It does not press with urgency. It simply reminds you that the sea is deep above and deeper below. Your movements become smaller. Your thoughts become less angular. The SIPADAN coral wall draws the eye downward, and the open water beside it seems to hold a blue so dense it is almost soft. You can hear your own inner silence more than anything else. This is the feeling the deep often gives. Not fear, but a spacious unasking. A place where the world does not require performance. A turtle may pass below us now, not silhouetted against sunlit water, but moving through a dimmer corridor along the wall. It knows ledges where it can rest. It knows the slope of the reef, though not in maps or words. Its body knows through repetition, through current, through smell, through the remembered feel of places. Around SIPADAN, generations of turtles have used these reefs, feeding, resting, surfacing, returning. Watching one descend with us feels like being allowed into an old routine. The turtle does not hurry, it trusts the water, and for a while you can trust it too. Deeper still, the wall becomes a place of outlines, and we follow those outlines gently, letting the last bright colors fade behind us. The deeper face of the SIPADAN coral wall has a hush that seems to gather in layers, as if every meter of water has softened the day a little more. You can still sense the reef above us, bright and busy in memory, but here the wall speaks in slower colors, in browns, violets, shadowed reds, and the faint silver tones of fish close to shelter. We drift beside it at the pace of a falling leaf. The water feels cooler against your hands, and the current brushes past like silk drawn through darkness. Nothing asks us to hurry, and so we don't. The coral is less crowded here, but it has not vanished, and you begin to see how life changes its language when light becomes scarce. Soft corals lean outward in the current, their small polyps open like pale stars, taking food from water that never stops moving. Sponges rise in rounded shapes and hollow tubes, quietly filtering the sea through bodies older in design than almost anything we know. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, these animals make a dim garden, without needing sunlight in the same bright way. You can feel their patience almost physically. It settles around us with the cool water. A small fish waits beneath a ledge, facing into the current, its fins moving just enough to hold it in place. You notice how little effort is wasted here. Every tail flick has a purpose. Every pause has a purpose too. The wall teaches that stillness is not absence, but a form of attention. And as we move lower, our own attention becomes quieter. The open sea beside us is now a deep blue field, without boundary or bottom. If you look into it too long, it feels less like looking outward and more like looking inward, into a calm place behind your thoughts. The animals near this depth often live between exposure and refuge, moving just far enough from the wall to feed, then returning to the protection of holes, shelves, and coral shadows. A grouper may hold its place in a dark recess, broad-bodied and still, its mottled skin matching the broken pattern of sponge and stone. Nearby, a cleaner wrasse moves with quick little ribbons of blue, attending to a client fish that waits in near-perfect calm. We watch without interrupting. The SIPADAN coral wall has its own manners, its own small agreements, and you can feel that we are visitors to a world already complete. Here the science of the reef becomes a science of edges. The wall rises from deep ocean into sunlit water, and every level along it receives a different mixture of light, current, temperature, and drifting food. Near the top, Coral can lean heavily on the energy of sunlight. Lower down, animals depend more on what the water carries past them. You and I are following that gradual change, not as a lesson with sharp lines, but as a soft gradient. It is like hearing music from another room, becoming quieter as you drift away, while another, deeper music begins beneath it. A sea fan spreads beside us, wide and delicate, its branches arranged across the current like lace. You may see tiny brittle stars wound around some of its limbs, thin arms looped and curled so neatly they seem embroidered there. The fan itself is an animal colony, made of many small polyps sharing a branching frame, and each one opens to catch what the water brings. The current presses lightly against it, and it yields without breaking. That yielding feels like one of the deep reef's quiet virtues. Nothing here is rigid for very long. Even stone, given enough time and water, learns to change. The light continues to thin, and now your eyes begin to rest more on movement than color. A dark fish becomes visible because its pectoral fins tremble. A shrimp appears because its antennae sway from a crack. A soft coral announces itself through tiny openings and closings that are almost too slow to see. We drift closer to the wall, still leaving space, and the roughness of the living surface feels near enough to imagine under your fingertips. There is salt in every direction. There is cold, but a mild cold, softened by the tropical sea and the steady shelter of depth. At SIPADAN, the wall's steepness means that reef life and ocean life meet almost immediately. There is no long, shallow slope easing outward for miles. The island's reef edge gives way to blue depth, and animals can move between worlds in a short distance. A school of fusiliers may stream above us, following food in the current, while below them, a turtle rests on a ledge, and farther out a shape of jacks turns slowly in open water. You can feel how vertical this place is. Life is stacked in layers, like a quiet forest turned on its side and lowered into the sea. The idea of a forest fits softly here, though this is not a forest of trunks and leaves. The sea fans are branches, the corals are thickets, the sponges are old-growth forms, filtering what passes. Small fish take the place of birds, moving through openings with quick turns and sudden pauses. But the sound is different, because water holds sound close and thick, and the reef's tiny crackles are felt more than heard. You may sense them as a distant fizz, a hidden texture in the hush. We stay with that hush, and it begins to feel like a blanket settling over the mind. A hawkfish rests on a coral projection, supported by its stiff lower fins, watching the water with a stillness that seems almost thoughtful. It does not swim constantly, because the wall gives it high points from which to wait. A small passing fish, a drifting speck of food, a changing current, all may matter to it. You see how each animal reads the reef differently. To us, the SIPADAN coral wall appears as beauty and depth, but to those who live here, it is shelter, root, pantry, nursery, and resting place. It is home in the most practical, intimate sense of that word. And as we follow the wall downward, the reef's bright surface life becomes a memory above us, while the slower animals of shadow take more of our attention. The next layer begins with a blue so deep it seems to hold less light than feeling. You can still see the SIPADAN coral wall beside us, but its details now arrive slowly, one by one, as if each shape needs time to rise from the water. A sponge first appears as a rounded darkness, then as a texture, then as a living surface dotted with pores. A ledge first seems empty, then reveals a line of fish hovering beneath it. We let our eyes become patient. The water is cool on your cheeks, and the pressure rests gently around your ribs. Here the reef's architecture feels more cavernous. Overhangs extend like quiet balconies above the open blue, and crevices run back into darkness where small animals spend their daylight hours. Soldierfish may gather in these shadowed spaces, their large eyes bright in the dimness, their red bodies muted by depth until they appear wine-dark and calm. They are creatures of evening and night, waiting through the day in the wall's protection. You can imagine them moving out later, when the reef above grows dusky, and the whole coral face changes its mood. For now they hold still, and we pass softly. The SIPADAN coral wall is shaped by growth, but also by removal. Parrotfish scrape algae and coral surfaces higher up. Worms and mollusks bore into limestone. Waves break old fragments, and currents carry sand away or settle it in pockets. Even here, in the quieter depth, the wall is being edited by living mouths and moving water. You might think of rock as permanent, but the reef shows a gentler truth. Hardness can be worked upon by softness. Teeth, tentacles, currents, and time all leave traces. The wall remains, but it is always becoming something slightly different, and that change is slow enough to feel restful. A narrow filefish drifts near a soft coral, angled almost like a leaf suspended in water. Its body is thin and patterned, its movement careful, its camouflage more about attitude than disappearance. It keeps close to the shapes that resemble it, letting the wall's textures break up its outline. You begin to notice how often survival here is not dramatic at all. It is simply matching your motion to the motion around you. It is knowing when to drift, when to pause, when to tuck into shadow. We take that lesson into our own bodies, floating without strain, beside the deep reef. In the open water off the wall, small particles pass like slow weather. Some are living plankton, some are the remains of feeding from higher layers. Some are mucus strands from corals and other invertebrates, sticky with captured dust from the sea. This falling material is sometimes called marine snow, and it helps carry energy downward into places sunlight barely reaches. You can see a few pale specks moving past your mask of imagination, each one turning in a tiny private descent. The deep sea is fed by such quiet falling. At SIPADAN, the coral wall catches some of that drift as it passes. A crinoid clings to the reef with a small grasping body, spreading feathery arms into the current. Each arm is lined with tiny structures that move food toward the mouth, and the whole animal resembles a flower more than the relative of sea stars that it truly is. Some crinoids move at night, crawling or even swimming with delicate pulses, but here one remains open and still. You may see dark and pale bands along its arms, a pattern softened by blue light. We hover near it in thought, and the animal continues its work without concern for us, gathering the invisible abundance of the water. There is comfort in realizing how much life happens without display. The wall is full of animals that do not need to be seen by us, and their hiddenness makes the place feel more complete, not less. A worm extends a crown of feeding tentacles from a tube, then withdraws at a subtle disturbance. A shrimp turns in a crack. A small crab wears bits of sponge or algae on its shell, becoming part of the surface it crosses. You and I notice these things slowly, and the noticing itself becomes soothing. The SIPADAN coral wall is not a spectacle here. It is a breathing quiet. The water has a faint, clean taste in the imagination, mineral and salt, with the warmth of the surface now mostly gone. Your body feels held from every side, and the sense of up and down becomes gentler, less urgent than it would be on land. Above us, sunlight still exists. Below us, the wall continues into dimmer water. Beside us, the open blue widens into a space that seems to have no need for edges. We descend with the current, letting it choose the pace. The reef's colors fade, but its presence remains steady. Like a handrail made of living stone, a turtle shell may appear again, partly hidden under a shelf, with patterns of brown and amber softened by the filtered light. The turtle rests in the wall's shadow, conserving effort, letting water move around its body while cleaner fish attend to small details. You can imagine the slow lift it will make toward the surface when it needs air, and the slow return afterward to this sheltered depth. Around SIPADAN, such movements are part of the reef's daily pulse, up for breath, down for rest, along the wall for feeding, outward into blue, then back again to the familiar ledge. The reef at this depth also holds memory in the form of growth rings, old coral skeletons, encrusting layers, and spaces left by animals long gone. A coral colony may die in one patch and become the foundation for sponges, algae, worms, and new coral larvae. A broken branch may lodge in a crevice and start another small structure. The wall recycles shape as well as food. You can sense that nothing is wasted quickly here. Even emptiness becomes available. Even a hollow in the limestone becomes a home, a hiding place, a channel for water, a quiet room in the side of the sea. And lower still, where the SIPADAN coral wall grows dimmer and the blue beside us deepens, we drift into a quieter region of ledges, shadows, and suspended light. The first thing you notice in this lower reach is how the wall seems to slow your thoughts. There are fewer bright distractions, fewer sudden bursts of color, and more time between each small discovery. A dark coral branch extends from the stone. A pale sponge glows faintly against shadow. A fish moves only when the current shifts, then returns to stillness. We follow with the same restraint, floating near the SIPADAN coral wall, as if moving through a long underwater evening. The water cools at the wrists and neck, and the silence becomes nearly tangible, a soft pressure inside the ears. This is a place where the reef begins to share qualities with the deeper sea. Sunlight still brushes it, but faintly, and the animals here are often shaped for patience, filtering, waiting, hiding, and sensing. Some feed on particles too small to see. Some depend on nighttime movement. Some simply rest during the day and become active when darkness makes the reef safer for them. You can feel the schedule of the wall stretching beyond our visit. We are here for one slow descent, but the reef moves through dawn, noon, dusk, and night endlessly, each hour opening different doors. A moray eel rests in a crevice, its head visible, its patterned skin blending with the broken reef around it. It opens and closes its mouth with steady rhythm, drawing water across its gills, and the movement is quieter than breathing in sleep. Small, cleaner shrimp may share the entrance of the same shelter, waving white antennae in the dimness. The eel is not a symbol here. It is simply a resident of a narrow, familiar home. We give it space, and it gives us a moment of stillness. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, even an animal with sharp teeth can seem entirely peaceful when seen in its own rhythm. The rock beneath all this life is not bare rock, but a surface repeatedly claimed and softened by organisms. Encrusting coralline algae add pinkish crusts where light allows. Sponges cover old skeletons. Bryozoans and tunicates form small colonies that filter the water. Worm tubes rise like tiny chimneys. The reef is a palimpsest, though we do not need the hard word down here. It is simply layer upon layer, life writing over life. You can look at one square of wall and understand that it contains years of settling, growing, grazing, dissolving, and beginning again, all held in a space smaller than your hand. A pair of angelfish moves across the wall with slow, deliberate grace, their bodies marked by bands that soften as they pass in and out of shade. They pick at sponges and tunicates, using the reef face as a long, vertical feeding ground. You may follow them for several breaths, watching how they tilt to inspect each surface, then glide on without hurry. The current moves their fins slightly even when they pause. Their colors belong to this dim blue just as fully as brighter fish belong above. Nothing here feels misplaced. Each body seems tuned to the depth it inhabits. The open water beside us may hold larger shapes only briefly. A barracuda could appear at the edge of sight, long and silver, nearly motionless, except for the smallest fin adjustments. Its body reflects what little light remains, then darkens as it turns away. We let it pass as part of the water's ordinary movement. At SIPADAN, the wall attracts both reef dwellers and wanderers from the blue, because food and structure meet along this steep boundary. You can sense that meeting without needing to name every animal. The wall is a gathering place, and the sea around it is always arriving. Your body drifts in the cool current, and the feeling is not falling exactly, but being carried downward by permission. There is no sharp descent, no rush of bubbles, only a gradual deepening of shade. The wall to your side keeps giving you reference, a vertical landscape of ledges and hollows. Without it, the blue might feel endless in every direction. With it, you know where you are. We are beside SIPADAN, beside the old coral face, descending through a living border between island and depth. The thought itself can loosen the mind. You are held between place and open water. Even the smallest animals here seem to practice economy. A blenny retreats into a hole, showing only its head, eyes turning slightly as we pass. A shrimp steps along the lip of a sponge, legs fine as threads, then disappears into a seam. A brittle star extends one arm from beneath a coral plate, feeling the current before revealing more of itself. You start to see that the reef is full of partial appearances. Nothing needs to show its whole self. The SIPADAN coral wall allows life to be glimpsed, not fully claimed, and that makes the watching softer. The science of pressure is simple in one way and profound in another. Water has weight, and every layer above us adds to the pressure below, touching every surface evenly. Creatures that live here are not resisting it as an event, because their bodies are made for it, balanced with the surrounding sea. You and I notice the pressure only as a calming idea, a gentle enclosing, like blankets drawn up slowly around the shoulders. The deeper ocean is not empty because of pressure. It is different because of pressure, and difference is one of the deep sea's oldest forms of beauty. The next soft change comes as we sink below the busier reef face, where the wall holds more shadow than color, and life gathers in quieter patterns. The SIPADAN coral wall now feels like a twilight country. The remaining light is blue-gray, and the reef's shapes have grown broad and subdued, as if every coral and sponge has been painted with the same calm wash. You can see ledges stepping into the darkness below, each one holding a little pocket of life. The water is cooler here, and the current has a more deliberate feel, sliding along the wall with slow insistence. We move with it, neither fighting nor leading, and the descent becomes almost indistinguishable from rest. This twilight layer is where the reef's vertical nature feels most important. Above, fish can rise into sunlight. Below, they can move into shadow. Along the wall, they can travel between different conditions without crossing a wide plain. Some species may use these depths only during certain hours, feeding lower or resting higher, depending on tide, current, and light. Some species may use these depths only during certain hours, feeding lower or resting higher, depending on tide, current, and light. You can imagine the wall as a quiet staircase for bodies that know it well. We are only drifting down one step at a time, but many lives move through it daily with an ease that comes from belonging. A small school of snappers holds near a ledge, their bodies angled into the water flow, each fish keeping its distance from the next with precise adjustments. Their eyes are large enough to gather the muted light, and their tails move in small, synchronized beats. When the current shifts, the school shifts too, not abruptly, but like a curtain being drawn by a careful hand. You watch the group and feel your own breathing settle into the pattern. The reef offers these quiet metronomes everywhere, if you are slow enough to notice them. Fish hover, fans sway, particles fall, and the mind follows. The wall itself bears marks of old growth and old breakage. A coral head may show living tissue on one side and pale skeleton on another. A sponge may fill a hole left by something that died years before. A ledge may collect fine sediment until a passing current lifts it in a small, soft cloud. These signs are not sad here. They are simply part of the reef's metabolism, the way matter moves from one use to another. Along SIPADAN's steep face, nothing remains in a single state forever. Life takes hold, loosens, falls, settles, and rises again in another form. You may see a lionfish hovering beneath an overhang, its fins spread like delicate fans in the dim water. It moves with a slow, floating poise, the long fin rays trailing softly, as if they are listening to the current. We do not need to dramatize it. It is beautiful because it is precise, because it knows the stillness of shaded reef, because its body turns patience into form. Around it, small fish keep their own distances, and the wall's shadow makes a calm room for all of them. The scene feels suspended, not frozen, but held in a careful balance. The chemistry of this place is part of its quiet story. Corals build skeletons from calcium carbonate drawn from seawater, and that building depends on temperature, acidity, light, and the health of the living coral tissue. Sponges process dissolved organic matter. Algae and microbes transform nutrients in ways too small for us to see. Every animal is surrounded by water that is also a medium of exchange, carrying minerals, gases, scent, and waste. You can imagine the sea not as blank space between creatures, but as something shared by all of them. We float inside that sharedness, breathing slowly in the mind. A few planktonic animals drift near the wall, transparent and nearly invisible, until they cross a slant of light. One might be a tiny crustacean, flicking through the water with brief movements. Another might be a larval form of something that will later settle on rock, sand, or coral. Much of reef life begins this way, as a small drifting body in the plankton, carried by currents before finding a place to become more settled. The SIPADAN coral wall is not only a home for adults, it is a landing place, a nursery, a vertical field where the future arrives almost unseen. There is a softness in thinking about larvae finding the reef by chemical cues, by light, by current, by the subtle signatures of a place. We often imagine choice as something loud and conscious, but the ocean is full of quieter forms of arrival. A coral larva settles, a sponge colonizes, a fish returns to a reef it somehow knows. You and I are arriving too, only for a little while, through imagination and listening. The wall does not keep us, but it lets us drift beside it, and that is enough for this slow descent. As we continue downward, the SIPADAN coral wall begins to feel less like a colorful reef and more like an ancient edge where life clings to shadow. The wall at this depth is darker, but it is not empty. A dark surface is often full of openings, and if you let your gaze rest, you find them one after another. Small holes with watchful eyes, narrow cracks with pale feelers, rounded sponge mouths drawing in water, soft coral polyps spread like tiny hands, closing and opening without hurry. The current brings a fine coolness now, and the light is sparse enough that each pale object seems to glow gently. We move through this lower blue with almost no effort, following the wall's slow invitation. A white whip coral arcs out from the reef face, long and flexible, its surface lined with tiny polyps. It bends with the current rather than resisting it, making a curve that seems drawn in water. On some whip corals, small gobies or shrimp may live in close association, using the slender branch as both home and lookout. You can see how even a single line in the sea becomes habitat. The SIPADAN coral wall is made of countless such small opportunities. A curve, a hole, a shelf, a fan, a shadow. Each one may hold a life fitted closely to its shape. The deeper reef asks for a different kind of seeing. You stop searching for brightness and begin noticing contrast, silhouette and texture. A fish's eye flashes once. A crab's leg shifts. The rim of a sponge catches a little blue. We drift slowly enough that these details can arrive without being chased. The soundless quality of the water feels stronger, although sound does travel far in the sea. What is missing is the surface noise, the wind, the chatter, the sharpness of air. Down here, the world has fewer edges. Everything reaches you through water first. The wall's steep drop also means that nutrients can be carried upward from deeper water under certain conditions, especially when currents and tides move along the island's slopes. This mixing can feed plankton, and plankton feeds the animals that feed the reef. You can think of the deep not as separate from the coral above, but as part of the same slow exchange. Depth sends coolness and nutrients upward. The reef sends organic matter downward. Fish travel between. Turtles rise and return. The SIPADAN coral wall is a conversation between layers, and we are drifting through one quiet sentence of it. A school of small fish tightens suddenly near the reef, not with panic, but with the coordinated awareness that schooling gives them. Each body responds to its neighbors, and the group becomes a shifting shape more fluid than any one fish alone. They turn, scatter slightly, then gather again into a loose cloud. You feel no alarm from it, only the grace of many lives sharing information through movement. In the dim blue, the school looks like a thought forming and dissolving. We watch it pass close to the wall, then fade into a deeper patch of shade. An overhang below us holds a sleeping arrangement of bodies. A turtle may rest there, or a cluster of fish, or a quiet sponge community taking advantage of the shaded ceiling. The underside of a ledge is often richer than it first appears, because many animals prefer indirect light and steady flow. Look closely, and you might find tunicates like small translucent vases, bryozoans forming delicate crusts, and worms extending feeding crowns into the current. The reef is not only what faces the sun, it is also what grows beneath, beside, and behind, where the light is softer and the water keeps moving. Your breathing, if you were here with us in body, would be measured and careful, but in this sleep journey, it can be loose and easy. The pressure of the sea becomes the pressure of bedding around you. The cool water becomes cool air at the edge of the room. The dimming blue becomes the darkness behind closed eyes. We are still beside the SIPADAN coral wall, but the descent also happens in the body as muscles release, shoulders lower, and thoughts stop needing to finish themselves. The reef continues downward, and you are allowed to follow. At times, the wall seems almost too large to understand. It drops beyond sight, while above it rises toward a bright reef flat and the small green island. We are suspended between those worlds, close to stone made by animals, close to water that reaches far into the Celebes Sea. The scale is gentle because nothing here insists on being measured quickly. You can let the immensity be simple. It is just deep water beside a living wall. It is just blue fading into darker blue. It is just one more place where the earth has learned to be quiet. And as we sink beyond the brighter coral gardens, the SIPADAN coral wall carries us toward the dim refuge where the reef's hidden life feels almost nocturnal. In this darker reach, you may notice the first suggestion of night even if the surface above is still day. The animals here already seem tuned to dusk, with larger eyes, careful pauses, and bodies that keep close to shadow. A squirrelfish hovers beneath a shelf, red turned dusky by depth, its spiny fins held open as it faces the current. Nearby, a small crab picks at the surface of a sponge, moving slowly enough that it nearly becomes part of the texture. We drift beside them in the cool water, and the wall feels like a long, quiet shelter. The SIPADAN coral wall offers shade in many forms. There is the shade behind a sea fan, broken and patterned. There is the shade inside a crack, narrow and complete. There is the broad shade beneath a ledge where bodies rest through the day. There is also the shade made by depth itself, the gradual subtraction of sunlight by water. You can feel these shades as different kinds of rest. One is like closing a curtain. One is like entering a room. One is like drifting into sleep without noticing the exact moment when waking loosens. A small octopus might be hidden in a crevice, though you would have to look slowly to find it. Its skin can change color and texture, matching rock, sponge or coral rubble with astonishing subtlety. It may show only an eye, horizontal and watchful, while the rest of the body becomes reef. Octopuses are intelligent in a way that feels quiet here, not showy, but intimate and embodied. They taste with their arms. They solve the shape of a place by touching it. If one lives along this wall, it knows the reef as texture, chemistry, shelter, and night. The wall gives many animals a way to be unseen without being absent. Camouflage is not emptiness. It is a relationship with background, light, and attention. A scorpion fish may rest on the reef, colored so closely to its surroundings that only the line of its mouth or the shape of its eye reveals it. We do not linger on danger, because that is not the mood of this place. We linger on stillness, on how completely an animal can belong to the surface beneath it. You look again, and the reef gently admits another resident into view. The current here is steady enough to animate everything that cannot swim away. Soft corals sway, fine hydroids bend, feathery arms of filter feeders tremble and reset. Even fixed animals are not motionless, because the water moves for them. You may feel that as a comfort, the idea that one can stay in place and still be touched by the world. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, many lives are rooted, attached, tucked in, or barely mobile. Yet food comes, water comes, oxygen comes, and the reef continues to exchange with the sea around it. A passing trevally may appear as a muscular shape in the blue, moving with more purpose than the hovering reef fish, then vanish beyond our comfortable sight. Its visit reminds us that the wall is not closed. It is porous to the open ocean, to tides, to migrations, to passing hunger, to drifting eggs. But even these movements feel softened by depth. The fish enters, turns, and leaves, without breaking the hush. The water closes behind it. The wall remains. You and I keep sinking at the same calm pace, watching the traces of motion fade into blue shade. There are places along the reef where sediment gathers in small pockets, pale and fine, lying on ledges like dust in an old roux. If a fish passes close, the sediment lifts in a soft cloud, then settles again grain by grain. Some of that material is broken coral, some is shell, some is the powdered result of feeding, boring, scraping, and erosion. It has traveled through bodies and currents to come to rest here. You can imagine each grain as a tiny history, no longer separate from the others, held for a while on the descending face of SIPADAN. The gentle falling of sediment echoes the falling of your attention. Thoughts rise, turn, and settle. The wall gives them somewhere to land. You do not need to follow each one. You can watch it drift down and become part of the quiet. The reef's own pace is generous this way. It does not demand a single focus. It allows the eye to move from fish to sponge, from sponge to shadow, from shadow to blue water, and each movement feels like another step away from the brightness of the day. Below this, the water deepens into a darker blue still, and the living edge of the SIPADAN coral wall becomes more sparse, more secretive, and more dreamlike. The wall here feels ancient in a way the bright reef above does not always reveal. Without so much color, you notice form, and form carries time. Ledges protrude where growth resisted erosion. Hollows mark places where rock dissolved or animals bored. Encrusting life covers older surfaces, and newer organisms settle over the old. You can sense the long making of the SIPADAN coral wall, even if each living animal is small and temporary. The reef is a collaboration across generations. It has no single builder, no single plan, only the repeated gestures of life in clear tropical water. A sponge shaped like a vase opens toward the current, and its rim is pale against the dimness. Water enters through countless small pores and exits through larger openings, and inside, cells capture bacteria and fine organic particles. Sponges seem simple until you spend time with them. Then they become almost miraculous, animals without faces or nerves like ours, yet perfectly able to live by filtering the sea. You drift near one and feel the quiet intelligence of form. A body does not have to resemble yours to be exquisitely suited to the world. The sponge belongs here completely. Near another ledge, a cluster of glassy sweepers, or small nocturnal fish, may hang in the shadow, each body translucent enough to hold the blue around it. They face the current, holding station, their eyes dark and reflective. By night, they may move more openly, but now they remain gathered in the reef's dim pockets. You can sense how the wall changes roles through the day, becoming a resting place for some, a feeding place for others, a passage for animals moving between layers. We are seeing one part of a cycle that never stops. The rest continues beyond our watching. The cooler water carries a slightly different feeling along your arms, perhaps from deeper currents brushing the island's slope. In reality, divers can feel thermoclines as sudden changes, but in our descent, the change stays gentle, more like passing from one room into another. The warmth above is not gone, only thinned. The pressure is not harsh, only fuller. The light is not absent, only reduced to a soft blue memory. This is how we keep going, by letting each change arrive gradually until the mind accepts depth the way the sea accepts it. A nudibranch crosses a patch of sponge with unhurried certainty, its small body bright only if light finds it. Many nudibranch feed on sponges, hydroids, or soft corals, and some borrow chemical defenses from what they eat, carrying the chemistry of their food into their own bodies. It is a quiet form of transformation. The animal becomes partly what it has consumed, not in shape, but in protection. You may picture its feathery gills moving gently on its back, its rhinophores tasting the water ahead. Even here, in dimness, there is elegance too small to hurry past. The SIPADAN coral wall is not a still life scene. It is a process. Water flows, animals feed, larvae settle, skeletons grow, skeletons break, and chemical balances shift in ways both delicate and vast. Yet from where we drift, the process feels peaceful because it unfolds without haste. You do not see the whole reef changing at once. You see one fish turn, one polyp open, one grain settle, one turtle rise. The mind can rest in that scale. It can let go of the need to understand everything and simply remain with what appears. A soft coral colony extends from the wall like a small underwater tree, its branches thick and flexible, its polyps giving it a faintly fuzzy surface. Unlike hard corals, it does not build the same massive limestone structures, but it adds shape, shelter, and feeding surfaces to the reef. Tiny animals may live among its branches, and fish may use it as cover. You can see it swaying lightly, never still for more than a breath. That motion is almost hypnotic. It folds the current into visible form, showing you the water that otherwise would pass unseen. The longer we stay near this lower wall, the more the boundary between seeing and imagining softens. You know there are more animals hidden than visible. You know the blue beyond our sight is not empty. You know the wall continues downward even where it fades. This not knowing is gentle, because the ocean does not need to be fully revealed to be comforting. Some things are peaceful because they remain partly hidden. The SIPADAN coral wall keeps its deeper rooms to itself, and we are only drifting past the doorways, listening to the quiet that comes from within. And as the reef face falls farther into shadow, we move with it, leaving the last easy brightness behind and entering a more muted blue. The water here has the feel of late evening. Though no sky is visible, everything is filtered, slowed, and softened. The wall is still close enough to guide us, but its textures now appear in low contrast, like relief under a thin cloth, a dark fan, a pale sponge, a ledge, a small group of fish tucked beneath it. You can feel how your mind fills the spaces between what is seen and unseen, and how kindly the ocean allows that. We are not searching hard. We are simply receiving the wall as it comes. At this depth, organisms that filter the current become especially important to the feeling of the place. Sea fans, crinoids, sponges, tunicates, and small colonial animals all face the moving water in their own ways. They do not chase food, because the ocean brings food to them. Their task is to be open at the right time, in the right flow, with the right surface. You can imagine the whole SIPADAN coral wall listening with thousands of tiny mouths. It is a strange image, but a peaceful one. A reef face quietly tasting the sea as the current passes. A fish with a lantern-like eyeshine turns under a ledge, and for a second you see the reflective layer that helps it use what little light remains. Many animals in dim water are built around sensitivity, not brightness. Large eyes, pale bodies, red bodies that darken with depth, feelers, lateral lines, chemical senses, and slow movements all help them live where vision is less certain. You and I move through this lesson gently. We do not need to become experts in the dark. We only notice that life has many ways to find its path. The open water beside the wall feels wider now, almost velvety. If a school passes through it, the fish appear as a shifting smudge before becoming individuals, then return to a smudge as they leave. Distance works differently in blue water. Shapes can seem close and then vanish. Light can flatten space or open it suddenly. You may feel that same soft uncertainty inside your own thoughts as sleep comes nearer. Edges blur. The wall remains. The current remains. The breath remains. Everything else can loosen and drift outward, beyond the need to be held. The limestone of the reef is made of lives that once were soft. Coral polyps laid down skeletons. Shells settled into cracks. Calcareous algae added crusts. Over time, these materials became the hard substance of the wall, even as new soft bodies colonized its surface. There is something deeply calming in that exchange between softness and structure. The fragile becomes foundation. The temporary becomes landscape. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, life does not only occupy place. It makes place, loses place, remakes place, and leaves room for what comes after. A small hermit crab may move across a ledge, carrying a borrowed shell like a private room. It picks its way over sponge and rubble with careful legs, pausing often, then continuing when the current allows. Its life is modest, tucked close to surfaces, but the reef has room for that modesty. Not every creature here is large, bright, or famous. Many are simply persistent. You can feel affection for these small lives without making them more than they are. The deep reef is full of ordinary work, and ordinary work becomes beautiful when you slow down enough to see it. The SIPADAN coral wall also reminds us that ecosystems are not flat collections of species, but relationships arranged in space. A fish needs a hole of a certain size. A coral needs light and clear water. A sponge needs flow. A turtle needs resting ledges and feeding grounds. Plankton needs current. Bacteria need surfaces, nutrients, and chemical gradients. All of these needs overlap here, not perfectly, but richly. We drift through those overlaps, as through a woven fabric, feeling the pattern more than tracing every thread. The wall holds it together for now, and the sea keeps passing through. You may notice that your attention no longer tries to name every fish. That is part of the descent too. At first, names help us enter a place. Turtle, wrasse, sponge, coral, jack. Later, the names soften, and the beings become motions, textures, and presences. A pale flicker, a resting shell, a branching shadow, a small mouth opening in the current. The ocean does not mind whether we name things. It continues. You are allowed to know less as you sink deeper, and that permission can be very restful. The next layer begins where the last colors thin further, and the SIPADAN coral wall becomes a dim vertical landscape of shelter, current, and quiet feeding. Here, the wall feels less like a garden and more like an old cliff covered in living weather. Soft growths cling to it where the current is kind. Sponges fill hollows. Corals persist where enough light and flow remain. Small fish hold close to relief, rarely straying far into the open blue. You can feel the water moving along the wall, a steady sideways touch that gives the whole place direction. We descend within that movement, not straight down like a stone, but gradually, as if carried by a long underwater breath. A black coral branch may extend outward in the dimness, though its name can be misleading, because the living tissue may appear pale while the skeleton beneath is dark. These corals often inhabit deeper or shaded reef slopes, spreading fine branches into the water to capture drifting food. You can picture each tiny polyp opening in the current, participating in the same patient feeding as many other fixed animals here. The branch is delicate, but its way of life is enduring. It does not ask for much brightness. It asks for flow, time, and a place to hold. The wall is quieter now in the way a library is quiet. Not because nothing happens, but because everything happens with lowered voices. A fish slips into a crevice. A particle lands on a sponge and is drawn inward. A coral polyp closes over something edible. A crab turns sideways and disappears into a crack. We move through the subdued activity with care. The water's pressure surrounds your body like a steady thought, and the darkening blue eases the mind away from the bright, sharp surfaces of the day. Some animals here may move vertically as the day changes, rising at night to feed and descending or sheltering by day. This daily migration happens throughout the ocean, from tiny plankton to larger fish, and the reef participates in its own local way. Darkness opens feeding grounds that daylight closes. Shadows become pathways. The wall offers shelter between movements. You can imagine the SIPADAN coral wall after sunset, when many resting fish emerge. Coral polyps open more fully, and the water fills with delicate motion. We are not there at night, but the deeper dimness lets us feel its approach. A delicate basket star may be folded tight during the day, hidden beneath an overhang, waiting for darkness to unfurl its many branching arms. When open, it becomes an intricate living net, catching food from the current with extraordinary grace. For now, perhaps only part of it is visible, a curled pattern tucked into shade. You can sense the promise of its nighttime shape. The reef is full of such folded possibilities. What seems quiet now may open later. What seems empty may be waiting. This is one reason the wall feels so deep, even before it disappears. The chemistry of darkness changes behavior more than substance. The water remains water, but less light, means different feeding, different risk, different communication. Some fish use smell more strongly. Some rely on touch or vibration. Some become almost invisible by choosing the right background. Others carry small patterns that help them recognize each other in low light. You and I do not need to decode it all. It is enough to know that the reef is sensitive to the fading sun, and that every evening rewrites the wall without moving a stone. The open blue beside us holds the possibility of larger passing life, but the tone stays calm. A distant shape might be a school turning in unison, or a solitary fish cruising along the current line. It appears, softens, and disappears. There is no need to follow. The wall is our companion, its nearness steadies the descent, and its hidden openings give the eye a place to rest. You can feel your own thoughts doing the same, appearing for a moment, then moving away into the blue without needing to be chased. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, life is also shaped by cleaning, grazing, and maintenance. Cleaner fish remove parasites from larger fish. Grazers keep algae from covering coral surfaces. Detritivores gather fallen organic matter. Filter feeders clear particles from water. Microbes transform what remains. The reef stays alive through countless small acts of tending, most of them unnoticed. You may find that soothing. The idea that care can be distributed so widely that no single creature carries it all. The whole system keeps itself in motion, and the motion is slow enough to become peaceful. As we sink a little further, the wall's living skin becomes more scattered, and the darkness between its features feels wider and more inviting. The SIPADAN coral wall now holds a blue that is almost grey. A shade close to the inside of closed eyes. You can still make out the reef face, but you are no longer drawn from one bright patch to another. Instead, your attention rests on the spaces, the soft intervals between creatures. A sponge here, a coral there, a ledge where fish hover in shade. The water feels cooler and more even, and the current passes with a low, continuous calm. We keep descending, and the world above becomes a distant brightness without detail. This lower region shows how a coral wall can be both rich and restrained. Life does not vanish when it becomes less colorful. It changes its emphasis. Form matters more. Flow matters more. Shelter matters more. A tiny hole in the reef may be as valuable as a wide coral head above. A dark crack may hold several animals whose lives rarely enter open water. You start to respect the wall's hidden geometry, the way it provides spaces for bodies of different sizes, habits and needs. It is architecture without blueprint, shaped by growth, breakage, and return. A small fish emerges from one of those cracks, then settles back with only its head visible. Its eyes track the current, perhaps watching for drifting food, perhaps watching for movement larger than itself. You do not need to know its name to feel the intimacy of that moment. An animal has shown you just enough of its life to suggest the rest. That is often how the deeper reef works. It gives glimpses, it keeps secrets, it allows the watcher to become humble. And humility can be very close to sleep when it is wrapped in quiet. The reef's steepness also affects how sunlight disappears. On a broad, shallow bottom, light can spread and reflect from sand, filling the scene with brightness. Along a vertical wall, much of the light passes by or fades into open water, leaving shadows deeper and more continuous. Overhangs become dim even at midday. Crevices become nearly night. You can feel that geometry in your body as we move. The wall's angle makes the descent visible, makes depth immediate, makes the blue beside us feel vast. SIPADAN's coral face is a place where downwardness is always present. A cluster of tunicates grows like small translucent vessels on a shaded surface, drawing water in through one opening and releasing it through another. They are chordates, distant relatives in the vast branching tree that also led to animals with backbones, though here they appear simple and vase-like. Their bodies filter the current, catching fine particles and plankton. You may see them as little glassy forms, pale against the wall, pulsing almost imperceptibly. The deep reef is full of such gentle surprises, lives that look like objects until you learn how quietly they are working. The feeling of being beside the SIPADAN coral wall at this depth is partly the feeling of being allowed to slow your scale of noticing. On land, the eye often jumps from landmark to landmark. Here, the landmarks are small and close. A polyp, a pore, a fin edge, a grain of sediment shifting. The mind follows, and its pace changes. You may find that the reef no longer seems far away or exotic, but intimate, almost like listening to someone breathe in another room. The wall is alive in thousands of small, unspectacular ways. There may be bioluminescent plankton in the water, though in daylight or dim twilight, they remain mostly hidden from view. If darkness were complete and the water disturbed, some might answer with brief blue-green sparks, chemical light made by living bodies. Many ocean animals use such light for communication, camouflage, defense, or attracting prey, and deeper waters are full of quiet glows. Here at SIPADAN, near the wall, the thought of that hidden light makes the darkness feel less empty. It is not a black absence, but a place where brightness has learned to be small. You can imagine night falling above, though we continue in this steady blue. Coral polyps extend more fully. Nocturnal fish leave their shelters. Plankton rises. Predators and grazers begin new routes along the reef. The wall becomes active in ways that daylight conceals. Yet even that activity need not feel sharp. In the sleep mind, it can be a slow opening, like flowers unfolding after sunset. We drift within the idea of it, with the current at our side and the living wall close enough to keep us oriented. And beneath this twilight, the SIPADAN coral wall fades toward a quieter border, where reef life thins and the deeper ocean begins to take more of the scene. The wall below us is darker now, and the blue around it has a depth that seems almost soft enough to lean into. You can see fewer animals at first, but the ones you do see feel especially present. A pale sponge mouth, a thin coral branch, a small fish holding close to stone, a crab hidden except for one claw. The quiet here is broad, and we enter it without resistance. The water presses evenly around you, a calm weight, and the faint motion of current keeps everything from becoming still in a hard way. At these deeper margins, food from above becomes increasingly important. Particles falling from sunlit waters, plankton carried by currents, and organic matter produced by the reef all help feed animals living beyond the brightest zone. The SIPADAN coral wall, because it rises steeply through so many layers, can intercept this moving food. Fixed animals spread their surfaces into flow. Mobile animals wait where the current concentrates particles or smaller prey. You can feel how the wall functions almost like a vertical shore, with waves of water instead of waves of air and sand. A large Gorgonian fan may stand out from the wall, its branches thinner now in the dimness, its full pattern visible only when you look gently. It faces the prevailing current, because orientation matters to a life that feeds by suspension. Tiny polyps along its branches open into the water, and perhaps small commensal animals shelter among them. The fan does not go anywhere, yet its existence is full of motion. Water moves through it. Waste moves away. Larvae may one day leave it or settle near it. Staying in place can still be a form of journey. We drift past a ledge where sand has gathered in a pale shelf, and the contrast against the dark reef makes it seem faintly luminous. A small fish rests just above it, casting a delicate shadow. If the current strengthens, the sand will lift and resettle, and the ledge will be redrawn by a few fine lines. This is how the lower wall keeps changing, not with spectacle, but with small adjustments. A grain moves, a sponge grows outward, a coral branch breaks, a new lava finds a surface. The place continues by increments. The water's coolness now feels steady enough that the warmth above is like a remembered room. You can still sense sunlight somewhere overhead, but it no longer defines the world around us. Here, the wall's life is organized around dimness, flow, and shelter. Your thoughts may be doing something similar, letting go of bright detail, keeping only enough shape to drift comfortably. We remain beside SIPADAN's coral wall, and the name itself becomes a quiet anchor. SIPADAN, with its green island above, SIPADAN, with its steep reef falling into blue. SIPADAN, with its hidden lives. A small cleaning station may exist even here, tucked near a coral outcrop where fish come to pause and be tended. Cleaner wrasse or shrimp advertise themselves through movement, color, or position, and client fish submit to their careful work. The arrangement requires recognition, restraint, and repeated trust. On a reef, such relationships are part of the living fabric, as real as coral skeleton and current. You can see why the wall feels peaceful when you attend to these details. It is not free of hunger or change, but it is full of patterns that hold. The deeper we go, the more your imagination may supply the faint glow of life beyond sight. In the open ocean, many animals use bioluminescence, and though the SIPADAN coral wall remains a reef environment, it looks outward into that darker pelagic world. The boundary between reef and deep sea is not a line painted on the water. It is a gradual exchange, with fish, larvae, nutrients, and organic matter moving through. We are drifting near that exchange now. The coral wall is still present, but the deep blue beside it has become a larger voice. You might see a single fish rise from below, inspect the wall, and sink again, disappearing into the dimness with a few slow tail beats. Its path is brief, but it reminds you that depth continues beneath our view. There are more ledges, more shadows, more animals adapted to less light, and eventually places where reef-building coral gives way to communities shaped almost entirely by darkness and current. We do not need to reach them all at once. The descent is enough. Each meter gives us another kind of quiet, and each quiet is complete while we are in it. Below this, the wall softens into darker shapes, and we follow its edge with the same unhurried trust, as if the sea itself were breathing us downward. The SIPADAN coral wall is now a presence more than a picture. You know it is there because the blue to one side is textured, interrupted, and alive, while the blue to the other side opens into distance. The reef face offers shadowed contours, and your eyes move along them slowly, finding a sponge, then losing it, finding a ledge, then letting it fade. The water feels cool and close, and the hush is so broad it seems to include your own breathing. We remain with the wall, letting its dimness become familiar. In this layer, many creatures live by being exactly where water passes. The current is not background, it is delivery, signal, and road. It brings oxygen to gills and tissues, food to filters and mouths, scent to hunters and mates, larvae to settlement places, and chemical traces that tell animals something about their surroundings. You can imagine the SIPADAN coral wall as an instrument played by current, every sponge, fan, crevice, and fish responding in its own quiet register. We do not hear the music with ears. We feel it in motion and arrangement. A brittle star extends several arms from beneath a coral slab, their thin forms banded and flexible, tasting the water for edible particles. The central body remains hidden, protected under stone, while the arms do the reaching. There is a lesson there, perhaps, in how life can participate without exposing all of itself. You and I are also partly hidden now, drifting in darkness, letting only enough attention reach outward to receive the reef. The rest can remain tucked away, safe in the soft interior space where sleep begins. The wall's colors have become a language of near blacks, grays, muted browns, and occasional pale surfaces catching stray light. Yet if a focused beam were to pass here, hidden reds and oranges might return suddenly, revealing that color has not disappeared from the animals themselves. Water has simply taken those wavelengths from the scene. This is one of the ocean's gentle illusions. What seems plain may only be waiting for the right light. What seems dark may still be richly colored in its own nature. The deep changes appearance, but not always essence. A sponge crust spreads over an old coral skeleton, smoothing some parts and leaving others rough. Tiny openings pepper its surface. Water flows through it constantly, though the movement is invisible unless you imagine it cell by cell. Sponges can host communities of microbes that help process nutrients, making them important players in reef chemistry. They are quiet, but not passive. They transform water as it passes through them. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, such hidden transformations are happening everywhere, and the whole reef is shaped by work too small to see directly. your sense of time can loosen in this blue depth. Minutes feel longer and softer. The wall seems to have been here always, though it too has a beginning, a history, a dependence on living conditions that change through ages. Sea levels have risen and fallen, corals have grown and died, storms have broken pieces away, currents have polished edges and carried larvae. Yet the feeling of age remains real, because the reef is made from accumulated life. We drift beside that accumulation, and it steadies the mind more than any single fact could. A pale shrimp stands near the entrance of a hole, antennae lifted into the current like fine wires. It may sense chemicals, touch, and vibration, reading the water with a sensitivity we can barely imagine. To us, the hole is a small dark mark. To the shrimp, it is shelter, territory, and lookout. The difference is humbling in a gentle way. Every place on the SIPADAN coral wall is experienced differently by each body that uses it. We see landscape. They feel home, path, food, and neighbor. The open blue beside us is now dark enough that it no longer invites the eye very far. It becomes a soft wall of distance, a place where shapes dissolve quickly. That dissolving is part of the sleep rhythm. You look outward, and there is less to hold. You look back to the reef, and there is just enough. The balance is soothing between the known and the unknown, between the textured wall and the untextured water. We keep sinking within that balance, and the sea continues to carry us without hurry. As we descend again, the SIPADAN coral wall becomes a quieter silhouette, and the living details appear like small lanterns of attention in the dark. A pale coral branch reaches into the current, and for a moment it seems almost luminous against the blue-gray water. Around it, tiny fish hover close, using its shape as shelter from the wider sea. They shift when we pass, then return to nearly the same positions, as if the branch holds them in an invisible pattern. You may feel how comforting such small returns can be. A fish leaves and comes back. A polyp closes and opens. A current bends a fan and lets it rise again. The reef is full of motions that return. At this depth, the wall's ecological richness is less immediately visible, but it remains layered. Microbes cover surfaces in thin films. Small invertebrates graze those films. Larger animals graze or filter or wait for prey. Fish use the reef for shelter, while drawing food from plankton or smaller reef residents. Turtles, rays, and larger fish may visit parts of the wall according to need and season. You and I do not see every layer, but we can sense their presence, the way one senses rooms behind closed doors in a quiet house. A ray might pass along a sandy ledge, flattened body, moving with soft wing-like pulses. It may be searching for small animals hidden in sediment, sensing faint movements or buried life through touch and electroreception. If it appears, it does so calmly, stirring a little sand, then settling or gliding on. Around SIPADAN, rays are part of the wider reef and slope community, moving through places where sand, rubble, and coral meet. We watch the pale cloud settle after it passes. The sediment falls slowly, and the ledge becomes clear again. The science of sensing is especially tender here. Many marine animals live in a world where sight is only one thread among many. They feel pressure waves through lateral lines, taste chemicals dissolved in water, sense electrical fields, detect polarized light, or read the direction of current through their bodies. You can imagine the SIPADAN coral wall as much richer to them than it is to us, full of signals moving through darkness. Our own limited sensing becomes restful, because we are not responsible for all of it. We can let the reef know itself. A dark overhang curves above a small recess, and the recess holds several fish arranged in stillness. Their bodies face outward, but their movement is minimal, each one conserving energy in the protected space. The shade beneath the ledge has a different blue, denser and more secretive. You can almost feel the cool stone above, though it is limestone grown from life rather than stone in the ordinary sense. We pass below without entering. Some rooms are best left quiet. The wall has many such rooms, and our descent honors them by moving softly by. The farther we go, the more the surface world becomes abstract. You might remember sunlight, heat, the sound of air, the smell of green leaves on the island, but they are far above the water's filtering layers. Here, salt and shadow define the senses. Coolness touches the skin. Pressure steadies the body. Blue darkness fills the eyes. The quiet seems to enter between thoughts and widen them apart. We are still on the SIPADAN coral wall, still following its old descent, and there is no need to reach anywhere quickly. A small colony of cup corals may occupy a shaded patch, their round forms open to passing food. Some cup corals do not depend on symbiotic algae in the same way many shallow reef-building corals do, and they can live in dimmer places by capturing plankton. Their tentacles may extend like fine translucent petals, turning the wall into a small night garden. You can see how the deeper reef is not merely a fading of the shallow reef. It has its own adaptations, its own soft beauty, its own way of receiving what the water brings. This receiving is the mood of the lower wall. Receive the current, receive the particles, receive the dim light, receive the shelter of shadow. You can let your body do the same in the room where you are listening. Receiving the darkness, the bedding, the slow air, the quiet behind the voice. The reef and the listener are not the same, of course, but sleep often works by resemblance. A gentle pressure, a fading light, a safe descent. The sea gives us those images, and we follow them down. And as the coral wall continues beneath us, we move toward an even softer darkness, where the reef is felt as much as seen, and every small life seems to speak in a whisper. The SIPADAN coral wall now appears in fragments. A pale edge here, a black hollow there, a faintly branching form leaning into the water. Between those fragments is blue shadow, and beyond them is the open depth. You can let the partial view be enough. There is a particular peace in not completing the picture. The water does not complete it for us. It offers only what the light can carry, and then it keeps the rest. We drift within that restraint, and the mind learns to rest there too. A fish with a rounded body turns slowly near the wall, and its side catches a subdued glimmer before it disappears into shade. The flash is brief, but not sudden, more like a thought crossing the edge of sleep. Scales often function as mirrors in water, reflecting the color of the surroundings and helping bodies blend into the changing light. In bright shallows, that mirror may sparkle. Down here, it softens into a muted sheen. You can feel how the same adaptation shifts mood with depth, becoming quieter as the world grows quieter. The reef's deeper residents are part of larger cycles that reach far beyond SIPADAN. Ocean currents connect islands, reefs, slopes, and open water across distances no fish or coral sees in full. Larvae released here may drift elsewhere. Larvae from elsewhere may settle here. Nutrients may rise from depth, move across the wall, and feed plankton that feed fish that feed larger animals. The SIPADAN coral wall is specific, intimate, and local, yet it is also connected to the great moving body of the sea. You can hold both truths gently, the closeness and the vastness. A soft coral contracts slightly as particles brush across its polyps. Nearby, a tiny worm withdraws into its tube, then slowly opens again when the water settles. These small closings and openings are like the reef's breathing, though each belongs to a separate animal. You may find your own breath following them, not exactly matching, just becoming easier. Close and open, drift and settle, notice and release. The wall repeats these patterns without speaking, and the repetition carries us downward in the calmest way. The lower wall is not a place of emptiness, but a place where abundance is less theatrical. It does not gather itself into obvious color for the human eye. It hides in holes, filters through pores, spreads in thin films, waits under ledges, and moves when the light changes. That makes it a good place for sleep, because sleep also belongs to hidden processes. The body repairs without display, the mind sorts and releases in darkness. Breath continues, the heart continues. Like the deeper reef, so much of what matters happens quietly. A small fish backs into a crevice with only its face visible, and the wall seems to close around it kindly. Shelter is one of the reef's great gifts. Without the three-dimensional structure of coral, sponge, and eroded limestone, many animals would have nowhere to rest, hide, nest, or wait. The wall is not just vertical surface. It is depth within depth, a place folded into itself. You can imagine the inside of it full of narrow passages and tiny chambers, each one scaled to a different life, each one known by touch and repetition. The current shifts slightly, and a new cool thread of water moves over us from below. It is subtle, but enough to change the feeling of the layer. Deeper water often carries different temperature, nutrients, and dissolved gases, and where it brushes a reef wall, animals respond. Polyps may open more in favorable flow. Fish may gather where food is concentrated. Filter feeders may thrive on exposed points. You and I simply feel the change as another soft lowering, another sign that the sea has more layers than the eye can count. As we sink farther, the SIPADAN coral wall remains near, though its details now come slowly, each one arriving and fading like a quiet breath in blue darkness. A long ledge runs along the wall, its upper surface dusted with pale sediment, and its underside rich with shadow. Beneath it, fish rest in a row, their bodies scarcely moving except for gills and fins. The arrangement looks peaceful, almost domestic, as if each has chosen a familiar place for the day. Above the ledge, a sponge rises from the reef, filtering steadily. Below it, the blue deepens without showing where it goes. We pause in our descent only in feeling, letting the ledge pass slowly upward beside us. Some of the animals here are suspension feeders, some are grazers, some are ambush hunters, some are cleaners, and some are scavengers of fallen material. These roles overlap and shift, but together they keep energy moving through the wall. Nothing exists alone in the strict sense. A fish depends on shelter made by coral. Coral depends on light, water chemistry, and tiny algae. Sponges depend on particles and microbes. Turtles depend on feeding grounds and resting places. The SIPADAN coral wall holds these dependencies without needing to name them, and we feel them as a kind of quiet interlacing. A small patch of encrusting algae colors the limestone in a muted pink-gray, barely visible at this depth. Coralline algae help cement reef structures and provide cues for some larvae to settle, making them important despite their quiet appearance. They are part of the binding of the reef, a living crust that helps hold pieces together. You might pass them without notice, but the wall would be different without them. The deep reef teaches respect for what is easily overlooked. Not everything essential is bright. Not everything essential is bright. Flying, playing. Not physically thicker, but emotionally dense, filled with blue shadow and the slow presence of depth. Your body can imagine being suspended here without effort, neither rising nor falling for a moment, simply held. The wall breathes through its animals. The current breathes through the wall. The open ocean waits beside it without impatience. We continue downward only when the current invites us, and even then, the movement is so gradual that it feels like settling deeper into a pillow. A fish leaves shelter, takes a few small bites from the surface of the reef, and returns to cover. This simple route may be repeated many times in a day. Out to feed, back to shelter, out again when the water feels right. The rhythm is modest, and that modesty is soothing. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, life is often made of short paths, repeated over long time. The reef itself grows through repeated tiny acts. A polyp builds, a grazer scrapes, a sponge filters, a larva settles. Sleep, too, comes through repetition, breath after breath. The dimness below suggests deeper communities we may not fully visit, where sunlight is only a faint trace or gone entirely. The coral wall may continue into zones where different organisms dominate, and eventually into slopes and sediments beyond the reef's bright building. We remain at the living edge, where reef and depth still speak to each other. You can feel the transition without needing a sharp boundary. Nature often changes this way, by gradients, by mingled conditions, by one kind of life, thinning as another grows stronger. The descent is a long, soft sentence, and lower again, the wall fades toward a darker blue, while the lives that remain close to it grow quieter, slower, and more finely tuned to the passing current. The SIPADAN coral wall is now a nearly silent companion. It rises beside us into unseen brighter water and falls below us into greater shadow. You can trace its presence by the movement of fish close to it, by the pale spots of sponge, by the slight interruption of particles in the current. If you look outward, the blue becomes almost uniform. If you look inward toward the reef, the blue breaks into small details. This alternation between vastness and detail is one of the deepest comforts here. The mind can expand, then return. A small anemone may cling in a sheltered hollow, its tentacles extended into the gentle flow. Perhaps tiny shrimp live among them, nearly transparent, marked only by fine lines and little spots of color. Their bodies seem made of water and attention. They clean, feed, and shelter in the anemone's softness, part of another small relationship within the larger reef. You can see how intimacy repeats at every scale. The island in the sea, the wall on the island, the hollow in the wall, the shrimp in the hollow. Each smaller space holds a world. The lower wall's quiet also reveals the importance of patience in marine science itself. To understand a reef, you do not only count the bright fish in a quick pass. You return. You watch at different hours. You notice which animals emerge at dusk, which currents bring plankton, which ledges gather turtles, which surfaces collect new growth. Knowledge here is built like coral, slowly through repeated attention. That is the kind of guide I am beside you, not rushing to conquer the scene, but sitting near the abyss long enough to feel its calm. A faint movement in a crevice becomes a crab, then only a shadow again. Its shell may be mottled with growth, helping it merge with the reef surface. It feeds on small bits of organic matter, algae, or whatever the wall provides, participating in the quiet recycling of the ecosystem. Nothing about it calls for spectacle, yet when you see it, even briefly, the wall becomes more alive. This is how the deep reef reveals itself, not all at once, but through small permissions. You are invited to notice, then invited to let go. The water carries the smell of salt only in memory now, because underwater scent is not sent to us in the familiar way. But animals here live in a world rich with dissolved clues. A fish may detect the presence of food, a mate, a predator, or a home reef through chemicals carried by current. Coral larvae may respond to microbial films on suitable surfaces. Crustaceans may follow faint trails we cannot perceive. You can imagine the SIPADAN coral wall, surrounded by invisible messages, a quiet script written in water, read by bodies built for the sea. As the light dims further, the idea of color becomes almost private. A red fish is dark to us. A patterned crab is just texture. A sponge's true hue waits for a light that does not naturally reach it now. There is peace in that privacy. The reef does not owe its full color to every passing eye. It can hold brightness inside darkness. It can be rich without displaying itself. You may let that thought rest in you too, the thought that not everything valuable must be visible, and not everything hidden is lost. The wall's vertical face may occasionally be broken by a narrow chute or groove, where water has moved sediment downward over time. These channels guide falling material and may concentrate food or create small corridors for animals. A fish can follow one, a crab can shelter near its edge. A sponge can grow where flow is favorable. Even erosion becomes habitat here. The forces that wear the wall also shape possibilities for life. Along SIPADAN, making and unmaking are braided so closely that they cannot be separated. The result is not disorder, but textured calm. We drift past the groove and return to the broader wall, where the open blue lies beside us like a dark, unrolled cloth. Your thoughts may now be slower than when we began. The reef has given you many things to notice, but none of them insist on being held. Fish, sponge, current, ledge, turtle, shadow. Each one arrives, and each one is allowed to pass. The descent continues in the same way, a sequence of soft arrivals and releases, until even the need to follow the sequence begins to fade. And as the wall carries us still lower, the world becomes a quiet meeting of limestone, water, and the faint lives that make a home at the edge of darkness. The SIPADAN coral wall at this depth feels almost like a shoreline for the dark. On one side, the reef face rises with its crevices and clinging forms. On the other, the open water extends into a blue so deep it begins to lose color. You can hover between them and feel both kinds of space. The wall is close, specific, textured. The water is wide, smooth, and ungraspable. We remain at the boundary, because boundaries are often where life gathers, and also where the mind can rest between knowing and not knowing. A few fish drift near us, neither schooling tightly nor moving alone with purpose, just occupying the water in the way reef fish do when the current is manageable. Their fins make constant small corrections. Their bodies tilt slightly upward, then level. One moves closer to the wall and disappears behind a sponge. Another rises into the blue, then returns. You can sense their ease with three-dimensional space, an ease land animals rarely know. Up and down are not barriers here. They are routes, options, and moods. The reef's living builders become fewer as light fades, but the wall remains shaped by their long history. Higher above, hard corals laid down the limestone framework that supports so much else. Lower here, other organisms occupy the structure, extending the reef's influence into dimmer zones. This handoff between builders and dwellers is gentle and continuous. You can imagine the upper reef as a bright village of construction, and the lower wall as its shadowed underside, where maintenance, shelter, filtering, and waiting become more important. Both belong to the same place. Both are SIPADAN. A passing turtle silhouette appears above and slightly away from the wall, its flippers moving in long, calm strokes. It may be rising toward air, or shifting to another ledge, or following a route known through experience. From below, its body is dark against the faint light, and then it angles away until the shape dissolves. The sight leaves a quiet afterimage. Turtles bring the surface and the depth together in one body, breathing air, feeding underwater, resting in coral shade. Watching one pass reminds you that boundaries can be crossed gently again and again. The pressure around us is steady, and in the sleep journey it becomes less a fact to measure than a feeling to inhabit. It is the opposite of emptiness. It is contact from every side. Water holds the reef, holds the fish, holds the falling particles, holds us in imagination. You can let that holding be enough. No sharp sound reaches here, no surface wind touches here. The wall is quiet, the current is slow, and your attention can become as diffuse as light in deep water. A tiny feather duster worm opens its crown from a tube, each filament extended to catch particles. The crown may be patterned, delicate and responsive, withdrawing quickly if touched by a change in pressure or movement. We keep our distance and watch it feed. The animal lives mostly hidden, offering only its soft feeding structure to the current. In that small gesture, there is a whole way of being. Protected body, open attention, shelter and reach. The deeper reef repeats this balance everywhere, and it feels like a peaceful arrangement for the night. The SIPADAN coral wall continues down beyond the comfortable range of bright reef imagination, yet our descent stays attached to what can be sensed. We do not turn the unknown into drama. We let it remain unknown, dark, and patient. There are more surfaces below, more currents, perhaps more animals fitted to dimmer conditions, and beyond that the larger deep sea with its own slow lights and soft sediments. For now, the wall is still beside us. Its living details are fewer, but the feeling of the place has grown deeper, like a note held for a long time. You may notice a faint shimmer as tiny fish turn together near the reef, their bodies reflecting the last blue light. They do not brighten the darkness so much as give it texture, a shimmer, then shadow, a shimmer, then stillness. The pattern is slow enough not to wake the mind. It is almost like the movement behind closed eyelids when sleep begins. Small lights forming and dissolving without needing meaning. We follow that shimmer downward, staying with the wall, letting the deep water soften every thought it touches. And below this, The SIPADAN coral wall dims further into the blue, and we continue beside it with only the quietest details left to guide us. The wall beside us is now a long shadow with small living edges, and the SIPADAN coral wall feels less like a place we are looking at, and more like a place we are slowly entering. You can still make out the pale openings of sponges, the thin reach of a coral branch, and the careful hover of fish that remain close to shelter. The water has cooled to a steady softness around you. The pressure is even and calm. We drift downward with the feeling of being carried, not pulled, as the reef becomes more subtle. At this depth, the eye learns to rest on contrast rather than color. A ledge appears because it interrupts the blue. A fish appears because it moves against stillness. A tube sponge appears because its rim holds a little more light than the wall around it. You begin to understand that seeing in deep water is not about taking everything in quickly. It is about allowing small things to reveal themselves when they are ready. We stay close to the SIPADAN coral wall, and the wall offers one quiet detail at a time. A white thread-like antenna extends from a crack, then withdraws, then slowly extends again. The animal inside remains hidden, perhaps a shrimp or small crustacean reading the current through touch and chemical traces. The crevice is only a narrow darkness to us, but to its resident it may be a doorway, a safe room, and a listening place. You can feel how the reef multiplies the meaning of every small space. A crack is not only a crack. A shadow is not only a shadow. The wall is full of rooms. The open water beside us has become darker than the wall, which seems strange at first, because the wall itself is shadowed. But the wall gives the eye something to meet, while the blue beyond gives almost nothing back. Particles drift there, faint and slow, turning as they fall along the reef face. Some will be eaten before they settle, some will pass into deeper water, some may come to rest in a ledge or hollow far below. We watch their descent, and our own descent becomes gentler because of it. The SIPADAN coral wall is still a reef, still shaped by tropical life, but down here it begins to share the mood of the mesophotic world, the dim light zone where sunlight is present only as a thin remainder. In such places, some corals and algae can still live, but they do so differently, with less easy energy and more dependence on careful conditions. Water clarity matters, current matters, slope and shade matter. You do not need to hold the terms too tightly. Just feel the change from bright abundance to quieter persistence, and let that change lower your breathing. A small group of fish rests under a shelf, each one angled slightly into the current, and their bodies make a pattern, almost like leaves caught beneath a stone in a stream. They are not asleep in the human sense, but they are resting, reducing movement, letting shelter do part of the work. Fish sleep in many ways, some tucked in mucus cocoons, some wedged into coral, some simply still and responsive enough to continue sensing the world. Here their rest feels familiar. You are resting too, held in your own dim shelter, while the sea moves around you. The wall's surface is a patchwork of hard and soft life. There are places where old coral skeleton gives a rough foundation, places where sponge has spread into a smoother skin, and places where sediment has dusted the ledge in pale grey. In a brighter light, these textures would show more color, but in the deep blue they become almost tactile. Your eye can imagine the difference between a brittle coral edge and a velvety sponge surface. We do not touch anything. We only let texture travel through sight, softened by distance. A crinoid clings to a dark projection, its arms partly open, partly folded, as though the current is deciding how much of the animal needs to be awake. The feathered arms collect food, guiding it inward along tiny grooves, and the body remains anchored to the reef with delicate grasping structures. Crinoids belong to an ancient lineage, older than many forms we think of as familiar, and seeing one here makes time feel deep as well as water. You can imagine such forms filtering ancient seas, long before this wall was here. The thought is large, but it lands softly. The deeper reef is not silent in truth, but the sounds are small and absorbed. Fish scrape, shrimp snap. Waves, far above, send faint pressure changes through the water. Boats, if any pass at the surface, would carry a muffled sound downward. But in this imagined descent, even that has faded away. What remains is the inward sound of stillness, the quiet you feel when the world becomes too blue to demand much from you. The SIPADAN coral wall holds that quiet without effort, and we keep sinking beside it. And as the wall falls into a darker shade, the next layer begins where the reef's hidden lives gather closer to the stone and the open water grows wider beside us. The SIPADAN coral wall now feels like a long twilight corridor, with the reef on one side and the deep sea opening on the other. You can picture your body suspended in that corridor, neither touching the wall nor leaving it, drifting in the narrow comfort between detail and distance. The water is cool along your hands, and every movement you make in thought creates a slow, soft resistance. There is no hard edge to the descent. The blue only deepens, and the wall continues. We follow it because it is patient. Here, a soft coral colony leans outward, its polyps extended in the current like a field of tiny pale flowers. Each polyp is small, but together they make a surface that seems to breathe, closing and opening in response to food, touch, and flow. These animals are not plants. Though they borrow plant-like shapes in the imagination, they feed, they sense, they respond. You can watch them without needing to disturb their work, and the gentleness of their movement may begin to match the gentleness of your own breath. A pair of small fish hover near the soft coral, using its branches as cover, moving just far enough away to feed, and then returning to the same familiar shelter. It is this coral, this ledge, this little passage of current. We often think of landscapes by their grandest scale, but for many reef animals, life is a small radius known intimately. You can feel the comfort of that limited map. A home does not have to be large to be complete. The SIPADAN coral wall holds countless small homes within its immense descent. The current shifts again, bringing a faint stream of particles from above and along the wall. Some specks are too small to identify. Others may be tiny plankton, fragments of algae, coral mucus, or the remains of feeding higher in the water. The reef receives all of this with thousands of openings. Sponges draw water inward, polyps catch and close, fish rise and turn. A brittle star extends another arm from beneath a ledge. Food arrives not as a meal placed on a table, but as weather, and every animal is shaped to read that weather. A sponge shaped like a narrow chimney stands near the edge of a shelf, its opening facing slightly away from the wall. Inside, water is moving constantly, though we can only imagine the flow. Sponges are among the great quiet filters of reefs, taking up bacteria and dissolved organic matter, helping cycle nutrients that might otherwise pass unused. They look still, but they are deeply engaged with the water. You can rest your attention on that thought. Stillness does not mean disengagement. Sometimes it is the best possible way to receive what the world is already bringing. The deeper we drift, the more the wall's life feels arranged around thresholds. The threshold between light and dark, the threshold between reef and ocean, the threshold between shelter and exposure. A fish waits in a doorway of coral. A shrimp stands at the entrance of a crack. A turtle rests beneath the lip of a ledge, halfway hidden, halfway open to the sea. You are at a threshold too, between waking and sleep, with the voice and the wall on one side and the deep quiet of rest on the other. The SIPADAN coral wall is famous in daylight for turtles, schooling fish, and bright coral, but here in the dimness, its smaller truth is easier to feel. It is not just a place of remarkable sights. It is a working vertical ecosystem where countless animals solve the conditions of depth in their own modest ways. Some cling, some hover, some filter, some hide, some travel in and out with the tides and hours. We drift through their quiet arrangements, and no single creature needs to become the center. The whole wall is the presence. A hermit crab moves across a ledge, carrying its shell slowly over a surface dusted with sediment. It pauses at a patch of organic film, touches it with small mouthparts, then continues. The borrowed shell has its own story, once made by a snail, then emptied, then taken up as shelter by another body. On the reef, one life's abandoned form often becomes another life's protection. There is no waste in the emotional sense here, only change of use. Even emptiness can be inhabited again, and that thought settles quietly. Below us, the wall loses more detail, and we move with it, entering the blue hush where the reef begins to feel like memory as much as stone. The next reach of the SIPADAN coral wall is darker, and the creatures here seem to appear from the wall only when your gaze becomes very still. A small fish lifts from a crevice, turns once, and returns. A soft coral branch sways gently, showing the current's direction. A cluster of tiny tube worms opens like pale threads, then closes in a shared ripple when the water changes. You can feel the whole scene breathing in miniature, not with lungs, but with openings and closings, extensions and retreats. We drift beside it, keeping our own presence light. This is where light behaves like a scarce gift. It does not fill the space anymore. It brushes certain edges and leaves others alone. The upper rim of a ledge may be faintly visible, while the hollow beneath it becomes almost black. A fish can disappear by moving only a few inches into shadow. A red sponge becomes a muted dark form unless a beam reaches it. The ocean removes colors in sequence, and by doing so, it makes a different kind of beauty, one based on restraint, on suggestion, on the quiet of almost seeing. The wall's vertical drop also creates a kind of emotional depth. On land, a cliff can feel abrupt, but underwater the same steepness is softened by buoyancy, by the slow way bodies move through water, and by the blue haze that veils distance. You are not standing at an edge. You are floating beside it. You are part of the medium that fills the space. That makes the SIPADAN coral wall feel less like a boundary and more like a long companion, descending beside you into darker water without hurry or demand. A turtle shape appears below a ledge, mostly still, with only a slight movement of the head and throat. It may be resting in a place used many times before, a familiar notch in the wall where current is manageable and shelter is close. The shell is patterned, but the pattern has softened into the blue dimness. Around it, tiny fish move in delicate arcs, and perhaps a cleaner wrasse passes along the shell or flipper. The turtle accepts the attention as part of reef life. We watch from a respectful distance, and the stillness deepens. The life of the wall depends on repeated returns. Turtles return to ledges. Fish return to cleaning stations. Plankton returns each night toward shallower water. Currents return with tides and seasons. Coral polyps return to feeding after closing. Even your attention returns each time it drifts to the wall, the water, and the feeling of descent. Repetition is not empty here. It is how the ecosystem holds together. It is also how sleep arrives not through force, but through gentle returns to the same soft images, until the mind stops needing anything else. A narrow crevice holds a row of glassy sweepers, their translucent bodies catching the least amount of light. They face outward, hovering in a group, using the wall's shelter through the brighter hours. Their bodies are so slight that they seem almost made of blue shade. Later, in darker water or nighttime, they may move to feed more actively. For now, they wait. Waiting is one of the reef's constant actions, though we rarely name it that way. So many animals here wait with perfect competence, and the wall gives waiting a form. The deeper ocean beyond SIPADAN does not begin all at once. It begins by suggestion, by cooler currents, by thinner light, by the appearance of animals that rely less on coral brightness and more on water movement and shadow. We are moving through that suggestion now. The reef still holds us visually, but the open blue has grown more insistent, a wide softness beside the textured wall. You can look into it without finding an end. That endlessness is peaceful when approached slowly. It asks nothing, and it explains nothing, and still it surrounds everything. A small patch of rubble has collected on a ledge, made of old coral fragments, shell pieces, and sand. Rubble may seem like brokenness at first, but it can be habitat too. Tiny crustaceans shelter between pieces. Algae and bacteria grow over surfaces. Young corals may settle on stable fragments if conditions are right. Small fish use the unevenness as cover. The wall is full of such second lives, places where what has broken becomes useful again. You may feel how gentle that idea is, especially in the dark. where nothing needs to appear whole to matter. And as we continue lower, the SIPADAN coral wall becomes a dim, living margin, where each small movement has space around it, and every color rests beneath blue. The water now feels like a deepened evening, with the pressure steady and the current moving along the wall in one broad, unhurried direction. You can imagine your hand drifting beside you, fingers relaxed, the sea parting and closing around them without sound. The wall is near enough for orientation, and far enough to remain untouched. A pale sponge opens, a fish hovers, a sea fan sways in the faint flow. We take these details slowly, because this layer gives them slowly, and the rhythm keeps lowering us. A large sea fan appears partly broken, one branch missing, another covered with smaller growth. The injury is old, softened by colonization and time. On a reef, breakage is not always an ending. It can create new edges, new surfaces, new places for larvae to settle, and small animals to shelter. The fan continues to feed where it can, spreading what remains into the current. You can see resilience here without drama, as a quiet continuation of ordinary life. The SIPADAN coral wall is full of things that have changed shape and kept living. A fish with a blunt head noses along the surface, taking small bites from algae or invertebrate growth. Each bite is precise, almost delicate, and then the fish moves on. Grazing helps keep surfaces open, preventing some growths from covering others, and the pattern of bites becomes part of the reef's daily maintenance. You hear no sound from it at this depth, though on a real reef, feeding can produce clicks, scrapes, and tiny knocks. In our descent, those sounds are softened into texture. The wall is being tended by mouths too small or too quiet to wake the dream. The lower reef teaches how ecosystems are made from relationships that do not look sentimental. A sponge filters water that carries microbes. A fish shelters in coral made by animals it may also graze near. A crab cleans organic matter from a ledge. A turtle rests while fish pick at its shell. A current feeds one animal and carries away another's waste. There is no central command, no single purpose that belongs to all. Yet the whole arrangement holds, shifting and repairing and adjusting. We drift beside it, and its distributed calm becomes part of the night's breathing. A small cluster of cup corals opens on the shaded side of a ledge, their tentacles extended into the blue. They look like tiny flowers, but their bodies are animals arranged around mouths, each one taking plankton from the passing water. Because some can live with little or no dependence on sunlight, they can occupy dimmer places than many reef-building corals. Their presence here feels like a whisper from the deeper sea, where feeding from darkness becomes the norm. You can watch them open and feel how beautifully life answers limitation with form. The open water beyond the wall may contain drifting gelatinous animals, almost invisible unless they catch the faint light. A small salp, a comb jelly, or another transparent traveler may pass without leaving much trace. Such bodies are mostly water, formed into temporary shapes that pulse, drift, feed, and continue through the current. If a comb jelly turns just right, rows of tiny beating cilia can scatter light into subtle colors, not a flashing display, but a delicate shimmer. In the deep blue, even transparency can become a form of presence. You may feel yourself becoming transparent too, in the sense that the day's hard outlines are less defined. The reef is not asking you to be alert in the ordinary way. It gives you enough detail to stay gently oriented, and enough darkness to loosen everything else. We are beside the SIPADAN coral wall, and that simple fact returns like a calm refrain. Wall to one side, blue to the other, current around us. Small lives hidden in the stone, downwards slowly with no sharp arrival required. Below this, the wall's features grow farther apart, and we drift through the spaces between them as if moving through a quiet, underwater dusk. The SIPADAN coral wall remains alive here, but its life has become more widely spaced, or at least less visible in the dimness. A sponge colony occupies one patch of rock, a small coral cluster clings to another, a line of fish hovers beneath a narrow ledge, each body still enough to be mistaken for part of the shadow. The water feels smooth and cool across your skin, and the current has a slow, consistent pull along the reef face. We follow the pull, letting it draw us into a softer region. At this depth, light is no longer the main storyteller. Shape, flow, and shelter tell more. A surface exposed to current may host filter feeders. A protected hollow may hold resting fish. A sloping ledge may gather sediment and the animals that feed on it. A vertical drop may remain bare in places where attachment is difficult or grazing is strong. You begin to read the wall not as a static backdrop, but as a set of conditions, each one inviting certain forms of life and discouraging others. The reef is a quiet grammar written in limestone and water. A small eel-like fish slips through a crack and vanishes before you can follow it. Its body is made for narrow passages, for the hidden interior of the reef, for movement through places where larger bodies cannot go. The wall is full of these hidden interiors, and every visible surface hints at a volume behind it. You can imagine water moving through tiny channels, animals tucked into chambers, larvae settling in protected corners. The SIPADAN coral wall is not flat. It has depth within its depth, and that nested depth is deeply calming. The particles in the water seem more visible now because there is less else to distract the eye. They drift at different speeds, some falling, some carried sideways, some rising in small eddies near the wall. This slow particulate motion is one of the deep ocean's most soothing sights. It resembles snow, but warmer in meaning, because each speck is part of a food web, part of the downward sharing of energy. You can watch one pale point descend until it disappears, and then another takes its place. The sea is always letting go. A sponge surface may host brittle stars, worms, tiny snails, or microbial communities, each one using the sponge as landscape. The sponge itself uses the water as food source and medium. In this way, habitats nest within habitats. A wall holds a sponge holds smaller animals carry microbes. Microbes alter chemistry. The scale keeps folding inward until it becomes too fine for ordinary sight. You do not need to see it all to feel its abundance. The thought of hidden life can be enough, especially when you are drifting towards sleep. The quiet reflection here is simple. Much of life is unseen, and still it matters. Much of rest happens invisibly too. A reef renews itself through tiny, repeated processes. A body renews itself through sleep, through breath, through cells working in darkness. You can let the SIPADAN coral wall become an image for that hidden renewal, a place where darkness is not a void, but a cover under which life continues its careful work. The wall does not announce this, it simply keeps doing it, in the blue, in the cool, in the current. A small fish moves from one shelter to another, crossing a few feet of open water with quick but controlled fin beats. The crossing is brief, and then it is hidden again. For that fish, the open space may feel very different from the crevice, but the wall makes both available. Safety and exposure exist side by side, and life learns the timing between them. We watch the crossing as a small event, then let it go. Down here, even a short movement can feel complete, because the surrounding stillness gives it room. And as we move beneath that ledge and into a deeper shade, the wall becomes a quieter guide, leading us toward the lower blue where the reef's voice is almost a murmur. The SIPADAN coral wall now rises beside us like a dark reef cliff, not harsh, not bare, but subdued and softened by water. You can still sense the living skin upon it, though not every living thing can be seen. Some parts are textured with sponge and encrusting growth. Some parts retreat into fissures. Some parts seem smooth, until a small opening reveals a tube worm or a hidden shrimp. The open sea beside us is a wide darkness with blue still folded through it. We drift between these two presences and feel the day grow distant. A small colony of black coral spreads in fine branches from a shaded projection. Its polyps are tiny, and its growth is slow, often very slow, adding structure over long periods. Many such corals are important habitats, offering surfaces and shelter to smaller organisms. You can imagine them as dark lace in the current, though the living tissue may be pale or softly colored. Their slowness belongs here. The deep reef has no need to hurry its architecture. It makes space gradually, and other lives arrive gradually, and the whole thing becomes a patient dwelling. The water's movement is now the most constant sensation. It slides along the wall, sometimes lifting slightly, sometimes pressing downward, sometimes curling in small eddies near protruding ledges. You can imagine how animals choose their places according to this flow. Too strong, and feeding becomes difficult. Too weak, and food or oxygen may not arrive easily. Just right. And a fan can spread, a sponge can filter, a fish can hover with little effort. The reef is not only shaped by water over time, it is organized by water in every moment. A shrimp cleaning station may be tucked under a small overhang, marked by delicate white antennae waving in the dimness. A fish pauses nearby, then shifts closer, accepting the shrimp's careful picking. The exchange is quiet, almost tender in appearance, though it is also practical and ecological. Parasites become food, cleaning becomes maintenance, trust becomes repeated behavior. You can see how the reef turns need into pattern. The SIPADAN coral wall is filled with these patterns, and they make the darkness feel inhabited rather than empty. We are lower now than the bright tourist images of SIPADAN often show, lower than the effortless turquoise surface, lower than the busy gardens where sunlight makes every fish flash. But this lower wall is part of the same place, and it deserves the same slow attention. It is where the reef begins to loosen its hold on color and lean into depth. It is where small lives become easier to miss and perhaps more rewarding to notice. You and I are not looking for spectacle now. We are listening with our eyes. A fish rests against the current beside a sponge, using the sponge's shape as a small break in the flow. Its gills move steadily, and its body makes minute corrections to stay in place. Such simple resting positions are part of the reef's geography. A protrusion can be shelter, a hollow can be a sleeping place, a fan can be a landmark, a ledge can be a meeting point. The wall is mapped by bodies through use, and every animal's map is different. We drift through all those invisible maps without disturbing them. The pressure of the sea is greater here, yet it remains even and enveloping in the imagination. It does not press from one direction, the way wind or weight might on land. It surrounds, it equalizes, it makes the body feel held in all directions. That feeling can be translated into rest, into the way a bed holds the body when muscles stop working so hard. The SIPADAN coral wall beside us becomes part of that holding, a vertical presence in the dark, steady enough for the mind to lean against. And as we sink further along the wall, the last faint suggestions of the upper reef drift away above us, while the deeper blue grows calm and nearly seamless. The SIPADAN coral wall is still there, but it has entered the kind of darkness that asks for trust. You cannot see far ahead, you cannot see far below. You can only receive the wall as it comes beside you, ledge by ledge, hollow by hollow, living patch by living patch. This is not a frightening darkness. It is a resting darkness, the kind that lets shapes soften and thoughts grow less demanding. A pale sponge appears, a fisheye reflects, a strand of coral bends with the current. Then the blue gathers again. A small field of hydroids covers a shaded surface, each tiny animal extending delicate feeding structures into the water. Hydroids can look plant-like, almost mossy, but they are animals too, related to jellyfish and corals. They form colonies, sharing space and sometimes tasks, creating a miniature forest on the wall. You might never notice them if you moved quickly. Down here, moving slowly, you can imagine their fine branches trembling in the current. The reef becomes more intricate the more quietly you look, and that intricacy has a soothing power. A crab tucked into the hydroid patch moves one leg, then another, cleaning or feeding with small precise gestures. Its shell may carry growth that helps it disappear among the textures. Camouflage here is not a costume, but a relationship that must be maintained by staying in the right place and moving in the right way. You can feel how many animals live by matching themselves to the reef's patience. The wall accepts them because they have become part of its pattern. We pass slowly, and the pattern closes again behind our gaze. The deeper blue beyond the wall may hold animals that never touch the reef, bodies adapted to open water rather than shelter. Some may rise at night, descend by day, and spend their lives in layers of light too dim for us to read easily. The reef and the open ocean overlap at SIPADAN, and this overlap brings richness to the wall. You can imagine plankton from offshore feeding reef fish, reef larvae entering currents, and wandering fish using the wall as a temporary edge. The boundary is porous, and the sea moves through it softly. A small shower of sediment falls from a ledge above, perhaps disturbed by a fish or loosened by current. The grains descend slowly, spreading as they fall, then settling on another surface below. There is no urgency in the fall. Each grain seems to take its time, catching the faint light before becoming part of the dim wall again. You may feel your thoughts doing the same, loosened from some ledge above, drifting down through blue quiet, settling where they can rest. The image is simple, and the sea makes it believable. The lower wall also holds the evidence of darkness-loving feeding strategies. Larger eyes gather what little light exists. Barbels and antennae explore crevices. Long fins allow hovering. Flattened bodies press close to surfaces. Transparent bodies vanish into water. Red bodies darken with depth. You can see adaptation as a series of soft answers, each animal answering the same question in a different form. How do you live where light fades? How do you feed where food drifts? How do you rest where the world is vertical? The SIPADAN coral wall holds many answers at once. We drift past a small recess where the wall curves inward, making a sheltered bowl. Inside, fine sediment has settled, and a few thin worms or small burrowing animals may live beneath the surface. The bowl is not dramatic, but it is complete. It gathers falling material, softens the current, and provides a different kind of habitat from the exposed wall outside. You can see how variation creates possibility. A reef does not need endless space to be rich. It needs differences in light, flow, texture, and shelter, and the wall offers those differences continuously. Below this recess, the blue darkens again, and we continue downward with the wall close beside us, moving through a calm that feels older than speech. The SIPADAN coral wall now has the quiet presence of something ancient, though the individual animals upon it live their own shorter spans. A sponge may live for years. A fish may keep a territory for a season or longer. A coral colony may grow over decades. The limestone beneath them carries older histories still. You can feel these timescales layered together like the water itself, one above another, none needing to hurry. Our descent passes through them gently, as though moving through a library where every book is closed but breathing. A small fish cleans its gills with a quick motion, then settles again beside the reef. Such tiny maintenance gestures are constant in living bodies. Fish clean, breathe, adjust buoyancy, respond to current, watch neighbors, and decide when to move. None of this announces itself as important, but all of it is life continuing. The wall is full of such continuations. You can find comfort in that. The idea that existence is often maintained by ordinary, repeated acts, not dramatic turning points. The reef's steadiness is built from countless small adjustments. The current here may carry cooler water upward along the wall, and animals positioned in its path receive both food and refreshment. Upwelling and mixing can be important around steep islands, helping connect deeper water with shallower ecosystems. At SIPADAN, the wall's position in clear oceanic water makes it a place where currents matter deeply. We do not need to map them exactly in this moment. It is enough to feel their presence as a slow touch along the reef, a moving hand that feeds, shapes, and connects. A soft coral bends and rises, repeating the same motion in the current. Its polyps remain open, and each small mouth participates in the colony's feeding. The movement is so gentle that it could be mistaken for the sea breathing through the coral, though of course the animal and the water each have their own life. You may let that motion become the rhythm of the paragraph, the rhythm of the descent, the rhythm of sleep approaching. Bend and rise, drift and settle, open and close. Nothing sudden, nothing sharp. The wall's shadowed surfaces may host algae adapted to low light where conditions still allow, but as depth increases, algae becomes less dominant, and animals that capture particles become more important. This shift is gradual, and it depends on water clarity, slope, and local conditions. You can feel it in the scene without needing a diagram. There is less green, more brown, gray, pale, and dark. fewer sunlit thickets, more fans, sponges, and hidden feeders. The SIPADAN coral wall is teaching us how sunlight becomes food, and how life continues when sunlight fades. A slender fish rises slightly from the reef, opens its mouth to take something drifting, and returns. The action lasts only a moment, but it contains the whole logic of this depth. Wait where food passes. Move only when needed. Return to shelter. The simplicity is profound because it has been refined by so much time. You can let your own mind adopt something of that simplicity. Wait where quiet passes. Receive what comes. Return to rest. The sea offers the lesson without insisting that it be called a lesson. We continue downward, and the wall's details are now separated by longer intervals of shadow, like words spoken slowly in a dark room. A sponge, a ledge, a fish, a fan, a hollow. The space between them matters as much as the details themselves. In sleep writing, as in deep water, the spaces allow the mind to settle. You do not need a constant stream of brightness. You need a steady descent, enough texture to stay held, enough darkness to release the day. The SIPADAN coral wall gives exactly that. And as the living wall grows dimmer still, the open sea beside it seems to widen into a soft blue-black silence. The SIPADAN coral wall is no longer busy to the eye, but it remains full of presence. You can sense the reef behind the shadow, the long accumulation of coral growth, sponge colonization, fish roots, turtle ledges, and current-shaped surfaces. Even where we see little, we know the wall has depth, memory, and hidden motion. This knowledge becomes a kind of comfort. We do not have to perceive everything for it to exist. The ocean continues beyond awareness, and that continuation allows the mind to rest from constant watching. A pale tube worm crown opens on a shaded surface, delicate filaments arranged in a circle. It catches fine suspended particles, then suddenly folds inward when a small fish passes too close. After a time, it opens again. That small cycle of withdrawal and return is everywhere on the reef. Animals protect themselves, then re-enter the current. They close, then open. They hide, then feed. You can feel the emotional softness of that pattern. Rest does not mean disappearance forever. It means drawing inward until the water feels right again. The deeper reef is also a place of low contrast between living and non-living structure. Coral skeleton, limestone, shell, sponge, algae, bacteria, and sediment blend into one another across the wall. What appears to be rock may be covered in life. What appears to be an animal may be partly skeleton, partly colony, partly host to other organisms. The categories often do in nature when you stay with them long enough. You and I can let them soften. It is enough to say that the wall is alive and that its aliveness is layered. A fish with a pale tail fin turns under a ledge, and that small pale fin is visible longer than the rest of the body. It moves like a leaf in dim water, then vanishes behind sponge and stone. Perhaps it will rest there until evening. Perhaps it will emerge to feed in a few minutes. We do not need to know. The point is the softness of the leaving, the way a body can disappear without drama into a place made for it. The SIPADAN coral wall is generous with such disappearances. Your sense of your own body may now be quieter too. The imagined water holds the arms, the legs, the shoulders, the back of the neck. The downward movement is so slow that it can become indistinguishable from stillness. Above, the brighter reef continues with its turtles and fish and coral gardens. Around us, the lower wall keeps its small lamps of life. Below, darker water waits without hurry. We are between them, and the between place is peaceful. It does not ask us to choose anything. A tiny nudibranch may be moving across a sponge even now, too slowly for immediate notice. Its body carrying colors that the depth has muted. Nudibranch often seem ornamental to human eyes, but their lives are practical, specific, and chemically rich. They follow food, find mates, lay egg ribbons, and carry defenses in soft bodies. On the SIPADAN coral wall, one small nudibranch can be a whole world of color hidden in blue. You can imagine it crossing the sponge through the long minutes of our descent, unhurried and complete. The wall's lower face is influenced by what happens above it. If coral thrives in the shallows, more structure, larvae, and organic matter support lower communities. If currents bring plankton, filter feeders flourish. If sediment settles too heavily, some animals may struggle while others feed. The ecosystem is connected vertically, not only side to side. You can feel that vertical connection as we drift, layer after layer, each one depending on the ones above and below. The SIPADAN coral wall is not a stack of separate worlds, but one long gradient of life. A faint glimmer crosses the open blue, maybe a fish turning, maybe a small gelatinous body catching light. It appears so softly that it could almost be imagined, and then it is gone. The deep sea often gives itself this way, as traces rather than declarations. In a sleep journey, traces are enough. They leave room for the listener to drift. We do not chase the glimmer. We let it pass through the blue and return our attention to the dark reef face, where a sponge continues filtering without pause. And below us, the wall keeps descending, its living forms growing quieter, while the water gathers more darkness and the current carries us on. The SIPADAN coral wall now feels like a vertical nightfall. The light is not gone, but it has become thin enough that the scene belongs mostly to shadow. You can see the nearest surfaces, and beyond them, the reef fades quickly into blue. The water touches every part of you with the same cool patience. A few fish remain close to the wall, their movements careful, their bodies tuned to dimness. We drift beside them as if passing through a sleeping neighborhood, where windows are dark, but lives continue inside. A recessed hollow holds a small congregation of invertebrates, perhaps sponges, worms, and a few branching hydroids growing together where the current is moderate. The arrangement seems accidental, but each organism occupies the spot for reasons of flow, attachment, food, and protection. Reef communities often arise from many small settlement events, followed by competition, growth, disturbance, and replacement. The result looks natural because it is natural, not planned, but patterned by need and opportunity. You can feel the beauty of that, the way order can emerge gently without being commanded. A fish pauses at the edge of the hollow and fans its fins, sending a faint motion through the sediment. The particles lift, swirl, and settle again, and for a moment the hollow becomes cloudy, then clear. This tiny disturbance may expose food for another animal, cover a scent, or simply mark a movement through space. Every action on the wall can have small consequences for nearby lives. The reef is full of these local ripples. You make none, because our passage is only imagined, and so we can watch without changing the water. The deeper blue feels almost tactile now, a soft surface pressing against the eyes. There is still a difference between looking at the wall and looking away, but the difference has narrowed. The wall is detail held in darkness. The open sea is darkness held in depth. Between them, you float. This is the kind of image the sleepy mind can carry without effort. It has few sharp edges. It repeats gently. It lets the body remember that rest can be vertical, horizontal, floating, sinking, or simply being held. A small brittle star moves across a sponge with surprising delicacy, each arm finding purchase while the central body follows. Its movement is slow, but not uncertain. The arms explore, grip, release, and extend again, translating the wall into touch. Many animals here know the reef more through contact and chemistry than sight. The darkness that seems limiting to us is simply part of their ordinary world. You can feel that shift in perspective. The deep is not lacking what the surface has. It is full of different ways to be aware. The SIPADAN coral wall has been built from the interaction of living bodies and clear ocean water, but its continued life depends on balance. Corals need suitable temperatures, clean water, light in shallower zones, and space to grow. Fish communities depend on habitat complexity and food webs. Filter feeders depend on current and suspended particles. The lower wall reminds us of these dependencies without turning them into worry. It shows the quieter side of connection, where everything is linked not by force, but by ongoing exchange. We drift through that exchange softly. A lone fish rises from below, passes near the wall, and disappears upward into the blue haze. Its movement is so smooth that it seems less like travel and more like a thought-changing level. Vertical movement is ordinary in the sea. Bodies rise to feed, descend to rest, follow temperature, Avoid brightness, seek mates, and ride currents. You and I are moving vertically too, but at the pace of sleep. Downward is not an escape, it is a direction of quiet, and the wall makes that direction visible. Below this, the reef's voice becomes even softer, and we continue beside the SIPADAN coral wall into the dim place where only slow attention can follow. The wall now presents itself in long, muted planes interrupted by living shapes. A sponge here looks like a small vessel. A coral branch looks like a dark hand. A crevice looks like a narrow doorway into black water. You can spend several breaths with each shape, then release it. The open water beside us is deep enough that any passing fish becomes a visitor from another kind of space. We remain close to the wall, where the world is still textured, and the descent continues with a soft, unbroken pace. A few fish gather around a protruding ledge where the current may bring more food. Their bodies face into the flow, and their fins quiver with tiny adjustments. They are suspended, not resting exactly, not traveling either, but occupying a position that gives them what they need. You can feel the precision in that. To live well on a reef wall is often to find the right place in moving water, not too exposed, not too hidden, close enough to shelter, open enough to feed. It is a quiet art of placement. The wall's old volcanic foundation lies hidden beneath the reef's living and limestone layers, part of the reason SIPADAN rises so steeply from deep water. Over that ancient shape, coral and other calcium-building life have made a bright cap and descending wall, turning geology into habitat. This meeting of fire-born form and water-built life is part of the island's wonder. But down here, the drama of origins has softened into texture. The volcanic past is only a deep support. The present is sponge, coral, fish, current, and shadow. A small sea cucumber rests along a ledge, its body dark and soft, processing organic material from the surface beneath it. Sea cucumbers are quiet recyclers, turning sediment and detritus through their bodies, helping keep seafloor and reef ledges in motion. Their pace is slow enough to suit this layer perfectly. You might pass one without much thought, but it is doing the humble work of transformation. The SIPADAN coral wall is sustained not only by beautiful swimmers and bright corals, but by animals that clean, process, and return matter to the system. The longer we descend, the more the idea of beauty changes. At the surface, beauty may be color and clarity. In the upper reef, it may be abundance and motion. Here, beauty is persistence in dim light, shelter carefully used, a feeding arm extended into current, a fish resting where the wall curves just enough to ease the flow. You can let your idea of beauty become smaller and calmer. A pale sponge rim can be beautiful, a falling grain can be beautiful, a quiet hollow can be beautiful. A fish turns sideways under a ledge, and its eye reflects a point of light back toward us. The reflection lasts a moment, then disappears as the fish adjusts its angle. Eyeshine in dim water can feel like a tiny lantern, not made to guide us, but to serve the animal's own seeing. We borrow the glimmer for one breath, then the wall takes it back. This borrowing and returning is the rhythm of the descent. Nothing is possessed, everything is received, noticed, and released into blue. The current brings another faint coolness, and perhaps with it a slightly different scent to the animals that can read dissolved chemicals. To us, it is just a change in feeling. To the reef, it may carry information from elsewhere along the wall, from deeper water, from feeding fish, from spawning organisms, from distant plankton blooms. The sea is always more communicative than it appears. You can imagine invisible messages moving past your skin, not meant for you, but surrounding you. There is comfort in being inside a conversation you do not have to answer. And as we sink into the next shadowed stretch, the SIPADAN coral wall becomes a place of faint outlines, gentle currents, and lives that seem to breathe through the stone. The wall beside us is dark enough now that every pale form appears tender. A sponge opening looks like a small moon in blue shade. A coral polyp catches a particle and closes. A shrimp's antennae trace the current, barely visible, then vanish into a crack. You can feel how the scale of attention has narrowed from island to wall, from wall to ledge, from ledge to tiny opening. That narrowing is not confinement, it is rest. The mind no longer needs the whole world. It can settle on one quiet thing. At the same time, the open water keeps the sense of vastness nearby. To your left, perhaps, the wall holds detail. To your right, the blue falls away without measure. This contrast is one of SIPADAN's defining sensations. The intimate reef beside the immense sea. Many coral places slope gradually, but here the drop is immediate and strong, softened by water but unmistakable. You can hover beside coral and look into depth in the same breath. That meeting gives the wall its atmosphere, a calm awe that deepens as light fades. A small group of fish rises from the wall to take passing plankton, then settles back. Their movement is synchronized only loosely, each fish responding to food and neighbors in quick refinements. In the dim light, they resemble dark petals lifting and falling. You can watch them repeat the action several times, and each repetition becomes more soothing. Rise, feed, return. Rise, feed, return. The words are simple, but the motion is fluid, not staccato, and the sea carries it all in one continuous breath. The lower wall's ecology may include species that spend only part of their lives here. Juvenile fish might use crevices before moving to other reef zones. Adult fish might descend during the day or rise at night. Larvae might settle, transform, and later claim a territory. The wall is not one fixed community but a passage as well as a home. You and I are passing too, though gently, and our passage lets us feel how every place in nature is also a process. The reef is location and motion together. A pale fan trembles in the current, and its branches create tiny zones of slower water behind them. Small animals may take advantage of those microcurrents, living where flow is filtered and softened. Even within a single inch of reef, water speed can vary, and those variations matter. The ocean is not uniform at the scale of a small body. It has pockets, eddies, threads, and pauses. The SIPADAN coral wall is full of such fine-scale weather, and every resident knows some part of it intimately. You can let that thought return to your own body, where sleep also has fine-scale weather. A shoulder releases before the jaw. The hands warm or cool. Breath deepens by small degrees. Thoughts become less connected. The room darkens behind closed eyes. None of it happens all at once, and none of it needs to be forced. We are descending through water in the same way, change by change, layer by layer, until the descent and the rest become one motion. A hidden fish makes a low movement in a crevice, stirring a few particles into the water. They drift upward briefly in an eddy, then fall again, and the small cloud fades. The wall returns to stillness. That return feels important. The reef is disturbed in small ways constantly, yet it regains its quiet shape without effort. Current smooths. Sediment settles. Fish return. Polyps reopen. The SIPADAN coral wall does not freeze itself into peace. It allows motion and then absorbs it, the way sleep absorbs the last restless thoughts of the day. Below this, the reef face darkens further, and we follow it into a layer where the boundary between seeing and dreaming grows very thin. The SIPADAN coral wall is now almost monochrome in the mind, a living cliff in blue shadow, with only the nearest textures rising into view. You can still see enough to feel accompanied. A sponge leans from the wall. A ledge cuts a dark line. A fish hovers at the edge of shelter. The water feels cool and full, and the pressure around you has become familiar, no longer something to notice separately. We are simply in it now, held by depth, held by the wall, held by the slow current. In this lower light, animal behaviors that seemed small above become the main story. The careful extension of feeding tentacles, the decision of a fish to leave shelter, the choice of a crab to cross exposed stone, the opening of a sponge to constant flow. These gestures are quiet, but they are not insignificant. They are how the ecosystem continues. You may feel your own small gestures of rest in parallel, the release of a hand, the settling of the tongue, the slowing of the breath. Life is maintained by smallness. A long, narrow fish slips along the wall, using its body like a ribbon in the current. It remains close to the surface, then disappears into a shadowed groove. Some fish are shaped for open swimming, others for close maneuvering. and the wall provides opportunities for both. The groove may protect it, guide it, or simply make travel easier along the reef face. You can see how body shape and landscape answer each other. A narrow passage calls to a narrow body. A ledge calls to a resting body. A current calls to a filtering body. The reef's lower communities are less dependent on the bright partnership between coral and symbiotic algae, though that partnership still supports much of the structure above. As light weakens, feeding from the water becomes increasingly important. Polyps capture plankton, sponges capture microbes, fish capture drifting animals, detritivores gather what falls. The energy pathway bends from sunlight caught in tissues toward food carried by currents and falling particles. It is a slow shift, and we are drifting through it, feeling the reef lean from brightness toward depth. A small cluster of fish gathers near a crack where the current accelerates slightly. Food may pass there more reliably, or the crack may offer immediate retreat. The fish hold their positions with tiny fin beats, opening their mouths now and then. From a distance they seem nearly still. Up close they are constantly adjusting, reading water with bodies more sensitive than ours. You can feel the calm labor of that hovering. It is not laziness, it is skill. The wall rewards those who can spend energy carefully. The open blue has become so deep that it seems to contain sleep itself. If you look outward, there is no object to grasp, only gradations of darkness and faint drifting specks. That emptiness is not lonely, because the wall remains beside us. It is spacious. It gives the mind room to unclench. You do not need to imagine what lies far out there. You can simply let the blue exist, wide and quiet, while the SIPADAN coral wall carries the nearest signs of life through the dark. A soft coral retracts some of its polyps as the current shifts, then opens them again when the flow steadies. The colony responds without thought in the human sense, yet its response is precise. Life does not always need a brain to be responsive. Cells, tissues, and chemical pathways allow animals to meet the world in ways suited to their form. Down here, that responsiveness feels almost meditative. Open when conditions allow, close when they do not, open again. The reef repeats this simple wisdom across many bodies. We continue downward, and the wall becomes less colorful, less crowded, but never less real. The SIPADAN coral wall is still the same natural wonder we began with, the same steep reef face off the island, the same meeting of coral growth and deep sea, but our relationship to it has changed. At the top, we were visitors to brightness. Here, we are companions of shadow. The journey has made the place quieter, or perhaps it has made us quiet enough to hear what was already there. And beneath this shadowed reach, the wall opens into a darker stillness, where the lives that remain are scattered like soft points of attention along the reef face. The water around us now has a blue-black softness, and the SIPADAN coral wall is a long, dim texture to one side. You can see a few pale sponges, a few dark branches, a few ledges where fish rest close to stone. There is space between each sighting, and those spaces are restful. The current continues with calm consistency, like a slow exhale moving along the reef. We do not pause in a formal way. We simply allow the descent to become so slow that movement and stillness almost meet. A sponge here may host bacteria capable of complex chemical work, transforming dissolved organic matter and nutrients in ways that help sustain the reef. Though invisible to us, microbial life is everywhere on the wall, coating surfaces, living inside animals, and mediating exchanges that larger creatures depend on. The reef is not only fish and coral, it is also a vast hidden community of minute life. You can let the idea be soft rather than technical. The wall is alive beyond what eyes can hold, and that unseen aliveness deepens the quiet. A small fish brushes against a cleaning station, then waits while a shrimp or cleaner fish attends to its skin. This patience between species can seem surprising, but on reefs it is part of daily life. The cleaner gains food, the client gains relief, the station becomes a known place along the wall's invisible map. Around SIPADAN, where so many fish move between reef and blue water, such maintenance helps keep bodies healthy. We watch the exchange without making it grand. Its gentleness is enough. Its repetition is enough. The deeper we drift, the more sleep-like the wall's imagery becomes. A pale opening in a sponge becomes a moon. A sea fan becomes lace in slow water. A school of fish becomes smoke, then silver, then shadow. These are not exact descriptions in a scientific sense, but they are true to the feeling of deep water. The mind naturally reaches for comparisons when darkness takes detail away. You can allow those comparisons to rise and fade. They are part of the descent, and the reef remains quietly itself beneath them. A turtle is less likely now in the darker reach, though it may still use deeper ledges, depending on route and rest. If one passes above, it appears only as a broad shape against the faint higher light, flippers moving with dreamlike steadiness. That silhouette carries the memory of the upper wall, of warm water and coral gardens and sunlit scales. Then it fades, and the lower wall returns. The sight is not a climax. It is a soft thread connecting layers, reminding us that the reef is one continuous body from brightness into shade. The SIPADAN coral wall has a way of making the vertical feel gentle. On land, a drop can make the body tense. Here, buoyancy softens the idea of falling, and the water turns descent into drift. You are not tumbling. You are settling, with the wall as a guide and the current as a slow companion. The pressure increases, but evenly. The light fades, but gradually. The life changes, but continuously. Everything about the descent has been teaching the nervous system that downward can be peaceful. A small patch of sediment trembles as a hidden animal moves beneath it. Perhaps a worm, a tiny crustacean, or another burrowing creature is working just under the surface. You see only the result, not the body. The reef is full of such indirect signs: a track, a cloud, a shifted grain, a hole with fresh edges. Science often begins there, with traces, and wonder begins there too. You do not need to reveal the hidden animal. It is enough to know that the wall continues inward, below surfaces, behind shadows, under the settled dust. And as we follow the SIPADAN coral wall deeper still, the reef's visible life thins into scattered forms, while the darkness around them grows calm and complete enough to hold every soundless movement. The wall beside us now feels like a boundary drawn in softness, not a hard line, but a gradual meeting of structure and open water. You can see where the reef face interrupts the falling particles, where small eddies form near ledges, where fish choose shelter from the moving blue. The current makes the wall legible. Without water, it would be stone and skeleton. With water, it is root, food, and breath. We drift in that moving legibility, letting the sea read the wall to us one detail at a time. A pale encrusting sponge covers an old coral surface, smoothing its edges while preserving its underlying shape. The old coral once grew toward light, building a branching or rounded form. Now the sponge uses that form as foundation. Later, something else may grow on the sponge, or a grazer may open space, or sediment may gather. The reef is succession in slow motion. You can feel how time does not erase here so much as cover, expose and cover again. The SIPADAN coral wall is a palimpsest of bodies, each one leaving room for another. A single fish hovers just beyond the reef, slightly above a dark ledge. It holds station by moving its pectoral fins in tiny alternating strokes, a motion so efficient it barely disturbs the water. Its eye remains fixed on the current, on the wall, perhaps on small food drifting past. The fish seems restful, but it is aware. That combination is very deep ocean in feeling, relaxed and attentive at once. You can borrow it for yourself. Rest does not require complete disappearance. It can be a soft awareness, held close to shelter. The lower wall's food web includes many animals feeding on detritus, plankton, microbes, and each other in modest, continuous ways. Unlike the surface reef, where sunlight makes energy feel immediate and bright, here energy has often traveled. It has been fixed by algae, eaten by plankton, released as particles, carried by current, filtered by sponge, grazed by small animals and passed along. Food becomes a journey. You and I are following one version of that journey downward. watching how the sea redistributes the gifts of light into shadow. A small, transparent animal drifts past, almost invisible except for a rim that catches the dim blue. It may be a gelatinous plankton, carried wherever the water moves, feeding as it goes. Such animals can seem fragile, but they are well suited to the open sea, where being mostly water is not a weakness, but a way of belonging. It passes between us and the wall, then vanishes. For a moment, the boundary between creature and water feels very thin. That thinness is peaceful, because it reminds you that life can take many forms. The wall darkens below the transparent traveler, and we descend into a stretch where the nearest sponge is several slow breaths away. Space opens between details. The voice slows with that spacing, and your attention can spread. There is no need to fill every moment. The ocean does not fill every darkness with visible life, though life may still be there. Empty-looking water is part of the habitat too. It gives room for movement, for particles to fall, for signals to travel, for silence to become felt. A small fan coral bends away from the wall, and one tiny fish shelters behind it, using the fan as a break in the current and a screen from view. The fish and fan are not partners in a formal sense, perhaps, but their lives overlap in place. The fan grows where flow is right. The fish uses the flow shadow. This is how many relationships on reefs begin, not with intention, but with proximity and usefulness. The SIPADAN coral wall is full of such gentle overlaps, unspoken and constant. The idea of depth has changed since we began. At first, depth was the blue below the bright coral. Then it became a place of dim ledges and hidden life. Now it is almost a feeling, a calm fullness in the water, a spaciousness that makes every small creature seem suspended in time. You can let the feeling matter more than the measurement. The wall may drop hundreds of meters in reality, but in sleep, depth is measured by quiet. We are deeper because the world is quieter. We are deeper because you are softer. And lower again, the SIPADAN coral wall becomes a dark living outline, with only scattered openings and faint motions showing where the reef still breathes. A sponge opening faces outward like a small silent mouth, drawing water through its body without any visible effort. The surface around it is mottled and dim, and a brittle star arm coils near its base. You can imagine water entering, particles being captured, cleaner water leaving, all in a continuous loop that never asks to be noticed. The sponge's work is humble and immense at the same time. It is one of many filters along the wall, helping turn passing water into sustenance and shelter. Near the sponge, a fish with muted markings rests under a shelf, its body angled slightly downward. Its gills move, its fins tremble. Otherwise, it seems part of the ledge. If the light were brighter, you might see pattern and color. Here, you see posture, and posture is enough. The fish has chosen shade, current, and proximity to escape routes. It has fitted itself into a small decision made again and again through the day. We drift past, and its stillness remains behind us like a closed door. The SIPADAN coral wall's lower reaches remind us that ecosystems do not need to perform abundance to be abundant. Some abundance is hidden in pores, films, bodies under ledges, larvae in currents, microbes in tissues, and behaviors repeated at night. The human eye, especially in dim water, catches only a portion. This limited seeing can be restful because it releases us from the impossible task of total attention. We see what we can. We honor what we cannot. The wall continues on both sides of our knowing. A faint thread of bioluminescent possibilities seems to run through the darker water, even if no visible flashes appear. In deeper seas, living light is common, and the chemistry of glow becomes a language of distance, disguise, and contact. Near the reef, reflected light still matters, but the mind can feel the nearness of that glowing world beyond the wall. You may imagine a tiny blue spark far out in the water, then another, then darkness again. The image is soft enough for sleep, a lantern seen through deep curtains. The current carries us along a section of wall where ledges are smaller and the surface more sheer. Fewer animals can find shelter here, so life appears in isolated patches where texture allows attachment. A sponge grows from a rough spot. A coral branch anchors in a crack. A fish pauses near a slight protrusion. The reef is uneven in its generosity. and animals gather where opportunity exists. You can feel how important small irregularities are. A bump in the wall can become a home. A crack can become a world. Your own thoughts may now be arriving in isolated patches too, separated by stretches of quiet. A memory, then blue. A word, then current. A feeling, then the dark shape of the SIPADAN coral wall. This is part of the descent, the mind becoming less crowded, more spacious, more willing to let silence occupy the spaces between images. The reef does not rush to fill them. It lets the spaces remain, and the spaces become part of the soothing. Below this sheer section, the wall softens again with more ledges, and we follow the change as the reef offers new places for hidden life. A small ledge extends from the wall, and beneath it several fish rest in a loose group, bodies aligned with the current. The ledge creates shade, but it also changes water flow, making a pocket where hovering may require less effort. Animals know such pockets through their bodies. They return to them because the water feels right. We can only infer that, but the inference is gentle and grounded in what the scene shows. The fish remain calm, the ledge remains dark, the current continues over and around them. On the upper surface of the ledge, fine sediment has collected, and a sea cucumber moves through it with slow purpose. It gathers organic rich material, processes it and leaves cleaner sediment behind. This kind of feeding is part of the reef's housekeeping, though the word feels too domestic for the sea, and yet somehow fitting. Many animals clean by eating, recycle by moving, maintain by living. The SIPADAN coral wall is not maintained from outside. It is maintained by its residents, through the ordinary acts of being alive. A small coral colony grows near the ledge edge, its polyps partly extended. At this dim depth, growth may be slower than in shallower, brighter water, and each bit of extension matters. Corals balance energy from symbiotic algae, where light allows with food caught from the water. The lower the light, the more that balance shifts. You can picture the colony receiving both faint sunlight and drifting nourishment, living at the margin of two sources. It is a quiet form of balance, held in tissue and tentacle. The open blue beside us remains spacious, but the ledge gives a local feeling of shelter. This is how the wall alternates moods, from sheer exposure to tucked rooms, from broad vertical planes to intimate recesses. We descend through each mood without naming them as chapters, because the sea does not place signs between its layers. It only changes, and we notice a cooler current, a dimmer light, a different animal, a new texture under the gaze. The descent is made of such small transitions, and each one is soft. A shrimp steps along the underside of the ledge, nearly upside down, its legs finding purchase on the rough surface. Its antennae sweep forward, then outward, tasting the water. For a creature like this, the reef is not vertical in the way it is for us. It is simply surface, and surface can be ceiling, wall, floor, or passage. The ocean removes some of the gravity-bound habits of thought. Up and down still exist, but life uses them differently. You can let that loose in your own sense of weight. The SIPADAN coral wall, even in darkness, is a place of orientation for countless animals. It gives landmarks in a medium where open water can be featureless. It offers smells, textures, current patterns, magnetic context, soundscapes, and visual cues. Fish may learn territories. Turtles may remember resting sites. Larvae may respond to reef cues when settling. The wall is more than a surface. It is information, folded into limestone and living tissue. We drift beside that information without needing to read every line. And as we leave the ledge behind, the wall descends into a blue so quiet that each new form feels like a whisper from the reef itself. The next stretch of the SIPADAN coral wall shows only a few pale forms against the dark. A sponge like a rounded cup, a thin coral branch, a small fish tucked beneath a nub of stone. The water around them is wide and cool, and the current is steady enough to make every flexible form lean the same way. You can sense the unity of that movement. Everything soft answers the same flow. We answer it too. drifting with the current rather than against it, letting the descent remain unbroken. A fish rises from shelter to take a drifting speck, and the speck disappears into its mouth. That tiny feeding moment is the end of one journey and the beginning of another. The particle may have come from plankton above, from coral mucus, from a broken bit of organic matter, from life transformed into food by water and time. Now it becomes energy for the fish, which may one day feed something else, or release nutrients back into the reef. The ocean is full of such conversions, quiet and continuous. A tube sponge nearby filters its own share of water, not taking visible bites, not chasing, simply drawing the sea through itself. The contrast between the fish and the sponge is gentle. One moves to meet food, one lets food arrive. Both are valid answers to the same flowing world. You can feel how the reef contains many ways of living without ranking them. Fast and slow, hidden and open, attached and roaming, bright and darkened. Along the SIPADAN coral wall, each way has a place. The darkness around the wall is now soft enough that sleep may feel very near. The script does not need to become empty to help you rest. It only needs to keep lowering its energy, keeping the images smooth, keeping the descent steady. We remain with real animals, real currents, real geology, but we let them arrive in a cadence that does not sharpen the mind. A sponge, a fish, a ledge, a drift of particles. The wall continues. The water continues. You continue downward, gently. A small patch of coral rubble lies caught in a hollow, each piece once part of a living structure. Some pieces may be colonized by algae, bacteria, or tiny invertebrates. Others may shift during stronger currents, grinding slowly into sand or settling into more stable positions. Rubble zones can be complex habitats, full of narrow spaces for young fish and small crustaceans. What looks like disorder becomes refuge at a smaller scale. You can feel how the reef uses even its broken parts, not sentimentally, but effectively, and that effectiveness has its own calm beauty. The wall's geology and biology remain inseparable. The steep island form created the possibility of a dramatic reef wall, and the reef organisms turned that possibility into living structure. Currents then shaped who could live where, and animals modified the surfaces through feeding, boring, filtering, and growth. No single force made the SIPADAN coral wall as we experience it. It is a collaboration across time, between earth, water, sunlight, chemistry, and bodies. We drift through the result, and the result feels less like an object than an ongoing conversation. A fish under the hollow changes position, settling with its head toward the current. Its body relaxes into the shelter, its fins slow. In that small adjustment, you can see the intelligence of comfort, the way animals find the posture that costs least and protects most. You may let your own body do the same, finding the angle of rest, the place where breath moves without effort, the softness that requires no command. The reef offers the image, and the body understands without words. And further down, the SIPADAN coral wall becomes darker still, yet the sense of life remains, carried in small motions, hidden shelters, and the continuous passage of water. The wall now is almost entirely a world of close attention. You cannot take it in from far away. You must stay near in thought, letting the next detail appear from shadow. A pale worm crown opens. A sponge rim catches blue. A fishtail slips behind a ledge. Each sight is brief, but the rhythm is steady. The open water beyond is too deep to hold the gaze for long, so your attention returns to the wall, then drifts outward again, then returns. A colony of tiny bryozoans may lace over part of the reef surface, each individual animal living in a small chamber and filtering food from the water. Bryozoans are easy to overlook, yet their colonies add texture, habitat, and complexity to hard surfaces. They are part of the fine embroidery of the reef, one of many groups that make the wall more than stone. You can imagine them as a pale crust or delicate branching growth, almost invisible in the dimness, still participating fully in the water's exchange. The SIPADAN coral wall is quiet enough here that the idea of one animal finding another feels remarkable. In dim water, fish may use scent, sound, movement, territory, memory, or repeated routes to locate mates and companions. Some gather at particular places. Some follow lunar or tidal rhythms for spawning. Some release eggs and sperm into the water, trusting currents and timing. The reef's continuity depends on these meetings, many of them brief, hidden, and precisely timed. Life finds life in the blue, even when the blue seems almost empty. A faint line of current moves particles upward along a projection, creating a small feeding zone where several fish have gathered. They hover there because the water brings food more often than elsewhere. This is a reef principle written in motion. Animals concentrate where energy concentrates. Structure shapes flow. Flow shapes food. Food shapes behavior. And behavior shapes the visible pattern of life. You can understand it without effort, because the scene shows it softly. The wall protrudes. The current bends. The fish gather. The pattern rests. The sensory world has narrowed to coolness, pressure, faint motion, and dim light. The smell of salt is now only an idea from the surface, and the sound of the air is gone completely. Water has replaced them with touch. It touches the skin, the ears, the imagination. It holds the wall and all the lives within it. You can let that touch become the main sensation, a continuous, gentle contact that makes the descent feel safe and slow. A sea fan sways once, twice, then steadies in the flow, not counting time, but making time visible. Its branches divide and divide again, a pattern efficient for catching food while yielding to water. Many natural forms repeat branching because branching meets flow well, whether in rivers, trees, lungs, corals, or fans. Down here, the pattern feels familiar even in an alien world. Your body knows branching too, in breathways and blood vessels, in nerves spreading quietly through darkness beneath the skin. The wall's living edge is now so calm that each paragraph of the descent could follow one small organism for several minutes. A sponge filtering, a coral feeding, a fish resting, a crab crossing, a worm opening. The pace would still match the place. Nothing here requires quick attention. The SIPADAN coral wall has become a teacher of duration, asking the mind to stay with small changes long enough for them to become meaningful. You do not need to try. The slow voice, the blue water, and the dark reef do the work. And as we pass below the sea fan, the wall draws us into another shadowed level, where the reef's forms become sparser and the deep water seems to breathe more slowly. The SIPADAN coral wall at this depth is still textured, but the texture is subdued, like a low-relief carving in blue stone. You see a few raised forms, a few hollowed places, a few animals holding close to the surface. The current moves along it with a patient consistency, and suspended particles follow that current like faint stars drawn sideways. We drift among them, and they drift around us, all of us moving within the same invisible river. The descent feels less like going somewhere now and more like yielding. A small nocturnal fish rests in a recess, its large eye reflecting dim light. During brighter hours, such fish often keep to shelter, emerging more freely when darkness covers the reef. It may be waiting for a change we cannot sense yet, a shift in light, tide, or internal rhythm. Waiting here is active in its own way. The fish is conserving energy, staying aware, and remaining ready for the next part of its day. You can let that waiting feel familiar, as the body waits for sleep, not forcing it, simply preparing the conditions. The deep reef's quiet can make human time feel brief. The wall has grown through slow calcium deposits, biological settlement, erosion, and recolonization. A single coral colony may outlast many human seasons. A reef structure may persist across changes in generations of fish. The island itself rises from older geological history beneath the sea, yet the moment before us is tiny, one drift past one ledge in one imagined descent. Holding those scales together is soothing, because it makes the day's concerns feel small without making them meaningless. A shrimp steps into view, almost translucent, its body marked by small dots and lines. It may clean fish, pick at particles, or shelter among tentacles or sponge depending on its kind. Its legs move quickly but delicately, and then it stops, antennae extended into the flow. In the dim blue, it seems partly made of glass. You can see through it in imagination, and that transparency feels appropriate here, where boundaries soften. The shrimp is fragile-looking, yet perfectly real, perfectly adapted to its narrow, quiet place. The SIPADAN coral wall holds many forms of rest. Fish rest in crevices, turtles rest on ledges, corals rest in cycles of opening and closing. Sponges never rest in the way animals with muscles do, but their steady filtering has the calm of endurance. Even the wall rests in shadow, away from the bright demand of surface light. You are resting with it now, deeper in the script than before, deeper in the blue, with the same slow rhythm carrying you down. A small pale shell lies in sediment, perhaps empty, perhaps occupied by a hermit crab tucked inside. The difference is not visible at first. The shell is both object and possibility. Many reef objects have this quality, because life can enter, cover, borrow or transform them. A dead shell becomes shelter. A bare rock becomes settlement surface. A fallen coral branch becomes rubble habitat. The wall does not separate endings and beginnings sharply. It lets them overlap, and in that overlap, the ecosystem continues. The water just beyond the wall is darker now, but the particles still drift, and their presence keeps the darkness from feeling blank. Each speck catches faint light for a moment. Each one has a source, though we may never know it. A plankton shell, a coral fragment, a bit of organic matter, a flake of life falling from above. The deep sea depends on such small gifts. Watching them fall, you can feel how gentleness may be cumulative, how many tiny descents can feed an entire hidden world. And below this, the SIPADAN coral wall grows quieter again, leading us along its shadowed face toward deeper ledges and slower lives. The wall beside us is dark, but the darkness is not flat. It has layers, folds, hollows, and soft interruptions where living things cling. A sponge protrudes like a rounded knob, a small fan leans into the flow, a fish waits in a notch, only its eye and gill motion visible. The water temperature feels steady, and the current seems to move through the body as much as around it. We continue downward, letting the wall's slow complexity pass beside us without needing to capture all of it. A coral polyp closes around a tiny particle, and the motion is almost too small to notice. Yet this is feeding. This is energy entering an animal. This is the reef sustaining itself one mouthful at a time. Many reef processes are too small for the dramatic eye, but they are exactly what make the system alive. You can feel the value of small nourishment. A breath, a sip, a soft blanket, a quiet word. The body, like the reef, is kept by modest things repeated gently. The SIPADAN coral wall also carries the feeling of isolation, because the island rises alone from deep water, surrounded by the Celebes Sea. Yet that isolation is not loneliness, it is clarity. Oceanic water moves around the island, bringing life from elsewhere and carrying life away. Fish and larvae connect the wall to broader currents. Turtles and pelagic fish move through larger territories. The reef is solitary in shape, but connected in function. You can rest inside that paradox, alone and connected, separate and held by the same water. A dark fish glides out from under a ledge, inspects the water column, and turns back. Its movement is unhurried, as if the decision to return was made before it fully left. The ledge receives it again. Around the entrance, tiny organisms continue feeding, filtering, clinging, and waiting. You can sense how a ledge becomes familiar through repetition, how a place becomes home because bodies return to it. The wall is full of returns, and each return smooths the reef's rhythm deeper into time. The lower wall's surfaces may be less dominated by branching hard corals, but they are far from bare. Encrusting organisms cover the limestone in thin layers. Microbial films condition surfaces. Sponges and soft corals occupy favorable flow. Small invertebrates hide in the unevenness. The visual richness is quieter, but the biological richness remains layered. You are learning to see beyond color into function, beyond display into presence. That kind of seeing is slow and restful, and it suits this stage of the descent. A few fish move above us now, their silhouettes small against the faintly lighter water overhead. They may be returning upward, or simply crossing along the wall at a different depth. The sight gives a gentle sense of separation. There is life above, life beside, life below, each layer moving according to its own conditions. We are in one layer among many. The thought is comforting because it removes the need to be central. The ocean has room for everything to occupy its own depth, and as we sink beyond that crossing, the wall darkens into another quiet reach, where the reef is mostly shadow and the small signs of life become tender and sparse. The SIPADAN coral wall is still close, and your awareness of it is steady now, even when details fade. It is like walking beside a familiar shoreline at night, hearing water rather than seeing the full shape of land. Here instead, we float beside a reef cliff in blue darkness, sensing its presence through texture, shelter, and the occasional movement of fish. The open water beside us is broader than thought. The wall beside us is more intricate than sight. Between them, you can rest. A pale worm crown opens again from a tube, and this time we stay with it for a while. Each filament is a feeding surface, extended into the current to capture fine particles. The worm's body remains protected inside its tube, which may be built from calcium carbonate, mucus, sediment grains, or other materials depending on species. The crown looks delicate, but the arrangement is practical and resilient. Shelter below, openness above. It is a pattern the deep reef repeats in countless forms, and one the sleeping body understands. A slight eddy forms behind a protruding sponge, causing particles to swirl before rejoining the main current. Such tiny flow patterns can influence where larvae settle, where food accumulates, and where small animals choose to live. To a large human eye, the eddy is barely there. To a larva or a tiny crustacean, it may be a landscape feature. Scale changes everything. The SIPADAN coral wall, seen by its smallest residents, must be a vast country of currents, ridges, shelters, and chemical signs. The reef's dimness gives space to imagination, but we keep the imagination anchored in what lives here. Turtles, reef fish, sponges, soft corals, crinoids, shrimp, worms, crabs, and quiet schools along the wall. These are not fantasies. They are the kinds of beings that make a coral wall alive. We let them appear in soft focus without forcing them into drama. A turtle resting, a shrimp cleaning, a sponge filtering, a fish hovering. The repeated ordinariness is the point, and the point is peaceful. A small fish nibbles at something on the wall, then pauses as if listening. Perhaps it has sensed a vibration, a pressure change, or the movement of another animal nearby. Fish do not listen as we do, but they detect water movement with great sensitivity through inner ears and lateral lines. The reef is full of motion too subtle for us. Every fin beat, every current shift, every nearby body changes the water slightly. Down here, awareness is fluid. It travels through the sea itself. The pressure and coolness now have become part of the atmosphere so fully that they no longer need to announce themselves. They are simply the condition of being here. The same happens with sleep, when the room's darkness and the bed's support stop being separate sensations and become the world. We continue beside the SIPADAN coral wall in that integrated quiet. The wall, the water, the current, and your breathing are all part of one slow field of attention, gently lowering. Below this layer, the reef face stretches downward into an even softer dark, and we follow with the current as if drifting through the deepening shadow of a very old dream. The SIPADAN coral wall now appears in long intervals, and the script moves with those intervals, giving each image room to dissolve before the next arrives. A ledge with resting fish, a sponge with pale openings, a cluster of feeding polyps, a fan bent toward the current. Between them, blue darkness and falling particles. You can let the pattern become familiar enough that it no longer needs close tracking. The wall is there, the water is there, the descent is continuing. That is enough. A small eel withdraws into a hole as we pass, leaving only the suggestion of movement behind. Its home may extend farther into the reef than we imagine, a narrow passage shaped by erosion, growth, and occupancy. Many reef animals live in spaces that are invisible from outside, making the wall more inhabited than its surface suggests. You can feel how the unseen interior deepens the place. A home hidden within a wall, a life hidden within a home, a quiet hidden within the life. The food web in this dim zone may be supported by a mixture of reef production, drifting plankton, and detritus from above. That mixture changes with time of day, current strength, season, and broader ocean conditions. The wall is steady in shape but dynamic in supply. Animals must be tuned to variation. Filter feeders open when flow is favorable. Fish move when food appears. Scavengers respond to what falls. You and I can feel this not as complexity to solve, but as a gentle reminder that life listens to conditions and adjusts. A soft coral's branches move in a slow pattern that could continue for hours without becoming monotonous. Water bends them. Tissue yields. The colony rises again. The movement is never exactly the same, because the current is never exactly the same, but the overall rhythm remains steady. That is the rhythm we're using now. Slight variation within calm repetition. A new fish, the same wall. A new ledge, the same descent. A new shadow, the same blue hush. It is enough to keep the mind held without waking it sharply. The SIPADAN coral wall at this depth invites a kind of quiet respect, not awe that lifts the heart suddenly, but awe that lowers the breath. You sense the age of the reef, the intricacy of hidden life, the magnitude of the water beside it, and the smallness of your own passing attention. Yet the feeling is not diminishing, it is relieving. You do not have to be large here. You do not have to be central. You can be a drifting witness at the edge of a vast, patient system. A final glimmer in this stretch comes from a fish turning near the wall, its side catching a dim remnant of light from above. The glimmer fades as the fish angles back into shelter. The ledge darkens. The sponge continues filtering. The particles continue falling. We continue downward, carrying the glimmer only as long as it lasts, then letting it go. In deep water, letting go is part of seeing. Nothing remains fixed for the eye, and nothing needs to. And below us, the SIPADAN coral wall continues into darker water, where the reef's forms are fewer, the current is slower to the senses, and the descent grows quieter still. The SIPADAN coral wall is nearly gone into shadow now, not vanished, but softened until it feels more like a presence than a surface. You can sense it rising somewhere beside you, carrying its hidden fish, its resting ledges, its sponges still filtering the dark water. Below, the wall eases toward deeper slopes and quieter ground, where falling particles settle after their long descent. The current has become almost a whisper against the body. The last pale shapes fade into blue. Here, the reef's brightness no longer reaches us in any ordinary way. What remains is the slow rain of marine snow, the cool weight of water, and the soft suggestion of sediment waiting below. A tiny grain falls from the world above, turns once in the dark, and joins countless others that have been arriving for years beyond counting. You drift with it, not hurried, not separate, simply moving into the same stillness. The sea has no sharp edge here, it only deepens. At last, you come to rest where the wall's living face has given way to the quiet floor, where fine sediment lies undisturbed except for the smallest movements of hidden life. Far above, SIPADAN's coral gardens still glow in the sun, and turtles still rise through warm water for air, but down here those motions are only distant memories held by the dark. The bottom is soft beneath the imagination. The water is cold and calm around you. Nothing calls you upward. Nothing asks you to begin again. The sediment has been settling in silence, grain by grain, through long blue time, and now you have settled with it, at the foot of the SIPADAN coral wall, where the deep is still, and the quiet is complete.